Chapter 539. Breaking his head. Dajiang felt that he had pushed him far enough. He immediately retracted his hand and ignored him. He turned around and returned to the Gu family. Liu Wei felt that he was being looked down upon like never before. He even raised his fist. Where did this lunatic come from? It's simply ridiculous. Let me tell you. A low cry suddenly came from behind. Liu Wei was stunned. He realized that he had swung his fist too hard just now and hit the person behind him. He immediately turned around and saw the woman he had hit covering her face and retreating. She accidentally stepped on a rock and fell backward. Be careful. Liu Wei reflexively reached out and grabbed her waist to prevent her from falling to the ground. When Dajiang heard the commotion behind him, he turned his head and happened to see this scene. He was instantly infuriated. It was fine if he was unreliable and rude, but now that he was clearly engaged to Yundong, he was still hugging another woman. What was wrong with him? Dajiang looked around. He wanted to find a stick to smash his head. Liu Wei did not know that his life was about to be in danger. He steadied the woman's body and wanted to let go of her. Unexpectedly, the other party grabbed his clothes tightly with a frightened expression. Liu Wei, young Master Liu, thank you. The woman's voice was like a mosquito's, with a trace of shock. Liu Wei trembled unconsciously and hurriedly let go of her. The woman looked up. Only then did he feel that she looked familiar. It was just that he couldn't remember where he had seen her before. But he apologized anyway. I hit you just now. I'm sorry. It's not young Master Liu's fault. I stood behind young Master Liu rashly. I just wanted to greet young Master Liu. I didn't expect this to happen. Liu Wei frowned. If you want to greet me, so be it. Why were you standing behind me pretending to be a ghost? However, it was good that the other party was fine. He took 2 steps back and was about to leave when another woman walked out. Liu Wei also felt that she looked a little familiar. He just couldn't remember where he had seen them before. Strange, when did his memory become so bad? Madame Fang and her daughter were very happy to see him. Although Qingyuan was married, she still couldn't help but be interested in a young master like Liu Wei. She was a little surprised to be hit by him while standing behind him, but it was true that she wanted to get close to him. Unexpectedly, he actually hugged her. Madame Fang, who had arrived a step later, frowned and bumped into her, signaling her with her eyes not to forget her identity. However, Qingyuan felt very aggrieved. She had known young Master Liu for a long time and had interacted with him before she got married. Young Master Liu had a good impression of her and his attitude was very good. At that time, as long as she worked hard, she might be able to become the young madam of the Liu family. Unfortunately, Madame Fang disagreed. Liu Wei didn't know what Qingyuan was thinking. Otherwise, he would have vomited blood. Shui Rong heard the commotion outside the door. When he saw Liu Wei acting like a rich second-generation heir and heard him admit that he was Shao Qingyuan, he had a bad feeling. He quickly ran in to tell Gu Yundong. Thus, when Gu Yundong came out, she saw that her father had finally found a stick. He walked angrily towards Liu Wei and raised his hand, wanting to beat him up. Gu Yundong gasped and hurriedly shouted, "Father, stop." Chapter 540. He can bend and stretch with a thick skin. Dajiang's raised hand paused. Liu Wei suddenly turned around and saw the stick that was inches away. He immediately screamed and jumped to the side. You're indeed a lunatic. You actually still want to hit me. Do you really think I'm weakling? As he spoke, Liu Wei was about to make a move. However, Gu Yundong suddenly rushed over and slapped his hand away. What are you doing? He's my father. She knew that Liu Wei had practiced martial arts. Although he only had amateur martial arts skills, it was more than enough to deal with the weak Dajiang. Liu Wei almost fell to the ground. When he stabilized himself, his eyes widened in shock. His fingers trembled fiercely, and he looked like he was about to go crazy. What did you say? This lunatic is your father? Liu Wei, what did you say? Liu Wei suddenly took a step back, but he still looked incredulous. On the other hand, Gu Dajiang snorted and said to Gu Yundong, I knew it. He's unreliable. You shouldn't marry a man like him. You were indeed lying to me about his advantages of maturity and stability. How is he reliable? As he spoke, he turned to look at Liu Wei. Shao Qingyuan, if you want to marry my daughter, do it in your next life. Yundong was speechless. What happened? Liu Wei was speechless. Wait. Did he do something wrong to hurt his brother again? Fortunately, Yundong was quick-witted and immediately reacted. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. Father, he's not Shao Qingyuan. What? But he said he was. He glared at Liu Wei with a look that said, I dare you to deny it. This time, Liu Wei's brain finally functioned normally. He immediately took a step back and bowed 90 degrees to Dajiang. He said sincerely, Uncle, I was wrong. I failed to recognize you and didn't speak properly. I'm worse than a beast. If you want to hit or scold me, just do it. Please teach me seriously so that I won't make the same mistake again. Dajiang was speechless. What kind of people had he met recently? Could it be that everyone who was related to Shao Qingyuan had such a thick skin? The corners of Yundong's mouth twitched. Liu Wei's cultivation level had increased by another level. It seemed that in the past few months when she was not around, he had really improved. Looking at Dajiang's furious expression, she finally touched her forehead and said in a low voice, Father, this is Liu Wei, the young master of the Liu family. Dajiang was stunned. Of course, he had heard of Liu Wei. When Yundong mentioned this friend, she sounded very happy and comfortable. It was said that he was an outgoing young master who did not put on any airs. Old Master Liu had also taught Yundong a lot of business matters. Second young Master Liu was also Yunshu's classmate. For their sake, Dajiang had a good impression of Liu Wei. However, these good impressions were completely shattered during their meeting and conversation just now. He couldn't help but sigh. He glanced at Liu Wei and said angrily, All right, if there's anything, let's talk inside. Stop making a fuss. Who calls a woman's maiden name at the entrance? Yes, you're right. I won't do it again. Dajiang had no temper towards such people. He turned around and left. Seeing this, Liu Wei heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly followed. Madame Fang and her daughter stayed where they were. What about us? Chapter 541. Two touching Yundong seemed to have just discovered the mother and daughter. She turned around in surprise. Aunt Fang, why are you here? Madame Fang's eyes twitched. We've always been here. Really? I'm sorry, I didn't notice just now. Yundong smiled sweetly and sincerely. However, Madame Fang and her daughter felt that she was very detestable. She was clearly ignoring them on purpose. However, when she thought of her motive for coming today, Madame Fang suppressed the anger in her heart and squeezed out a smile. She said politely, Your eyes were on young Master Liu. No wonder you didn't see us. By the way, this is... She glanced at Dajiang and asked. Yundong found it funny. Didn't this woman hear her call him father just now? The woman even had an innocent expression on her face. Aunt Fang, you're a widow. Isn't it inappropriate for you to ask about a man's identity? Madame Fang was speechless. She really hated Yundong. Chen Yulan awkwardly changed the topic. Mother, you're too much. Didn't Yundong call him father just now? He must be Uncle Gu. As she spoke, she smiled and called out to Dajiang. However, she quickly revealed a puzzled expression. But Yundong, didn't I hear that Uncle Gu went missing? How did you find Uncle Gu? Yundong looked at her with a faint smile. How did I find him? Actually, I didn't find him. My father has been looking for us. My father is a person who values friendship and loyalty. Ever since he lost contact with us, he hasn't eaten a full meal or slept well. He took out all the money on him to find out the whereabouts of his wife and children. Sigh, the heavens don't let down hardworking people. After a lot of hardship and trouble, our family is finally reunited. Chen Yulan's face was twisted. It was as if she didn't say anything. Liu Wei wiped the corners of his eyes. It's so touching. Yundong. Dajiang was speechless. Madame Fang and her daughter were even more speechless. Although the truth was quite touching, Yundong's exaggerated expression and prolonged voice made it sound like she was reciting a book. Yundong could not be bothered with Liu Wei's abundant feelings. She said to Madame Fang and her daughter, If there's nothing else, well, go in first. Qingyuan wanted to stop her. This woman had no manners at all. They were already in front of her house, but she didn't intend to let them in. She didn't invite them to drink some sugar water before leaving. However, Yundong pretended not to hear anything. She turned around and entered the door. When the door closed, she blocked Madame Fang and her daughter outside. The two of them stomped their feet in anger, but there was nothing they could do. They could only glare angrily at the door and turn around to leave. That Dajiang is somewhat similar to Yunshu. Could he really be Yundong's biological father? As Qingyuan walked back, she knitted her brows and murmured, "How could it be so coincidental? Did they really find him? Mother, what should we do next? It won't be easy for Uncle Jiang to have any ideas about Yundong's foolish mother. Even if he succeeds with Dajiang around, the Gu family's assets won't fall into his hands. At most, Dajiang will divorce Madame Yang and let her marry into the Jiang family." At the thought of this, Qingyuan felt very depressed. All the preparations she had made for so long were in vain. She kicked the stone under her feet in frustration. Suddenly, she realized that it had been very quiet beside her. She had said so much, but her mother did not reply. She turned around in surprise and looked at Madame Fang. "Mother, I'm talking to you. Did you hear me?" Chapter 542. Fond of Dajiang. Madame Fang suddenly stopped in her tracks. It was unknown what she was thinking, but her eyes suddenly lit up with burning ambition. "Laner, that's Dajiang, right?" Qingyuan blinked. "Yes, Yundong calls him father." Madame Fang's smile gradually widened. "Dajiang is quite good-looking. Moreover, I heard that he has studied before. He's a knowledgeable person." Qingyuan knew her mother too well. When she heard this, how could she not understand what her mother was trying to do? But this was too whimsical. "Mother, don't tell me you want to," Madame Fang glared at her. "But can't I think about it? Dajiang is talented, handsome, and so rich. Think about it. If we let Jiang Yongkang seduce Madame Yang, we'll have to split the Gu family's assets equally with him. But if Dajiang and I achieve something, the entire Gu family will be ours. When I win over Dajiang, Yundong will have to listen to me and do whatever I tell her to do." Qingyuan felt that this matter was unreliable. But Yundong just said that Dajiang values the mother and daughter very much. He even suffered a lot to find them. What do you know? Don't others say that the more you lack something, the more you stress it? Look at how confident she is. She's clearly afraid that others will see that Dajiang doesn't care about them. That's deliberately for outsiders to see. With Madame Yang's appearance, which man has the patience to coax her? But this is just your guess, mother. What Qingyuan didn't say was that regardless of whether Dajiang really looked down on Madame Yang, at least she was good-looking. Although her mother was not bad, she was still far inferior to Madame Yang. However, on second thought, so what if Madame Yang was good-looking? She was a fool who did not even understand the relationship between a man and a woman. Men were the most impatient. They could still coax her for a day or two, but after a long time, they would probably be tired of her. Then, it was not a bad idea to let her mother try. "I'm just afraid that it won't be easy to get rid of Uncle Jiang." Madame Fang waved her hand. "It's fine. I'll talk to him." Qingyuan did not say anything else. The two of them returned to Chen Liang's house with their own thoughts. Now that Madame Fang's courtyard had been rented to Jiang Yongkang, they naturally had to stay at Chen Liang's house. Not only the two of them, but Qingyuan's husband, Wu Chong, was also present. He was talking to Chen Liang and the others. The Wu family also opened a small shop in town. In the beginning, Wu Chong and Qingyuan were engaged because of Chen Jinkai. After all, at that time, Chen Jinkai was still a small manager in the workshop in town. Although there were few people he was in charge of, he still had a little power in his hands. For example, the goods his shop had to buy were partly decided by him in terms of price and time. Who knew that Chen Jinkai would be sent home as soon as he got married to Qingyuan? He could only be considered a farmer now. It was said that he had to work in the fields every day. Now that he looked at it, didn't the man's hands and face look much rougher? In the past, when Chen Jinkai saw him, Chen Jinkai always held his head high and was extremely confident. Occasionally, he would teach Wu Chong as his wife's uncle and even warn him not to bully Qingyuan. Wu Chong was actually very unhappy. He was just a small manager. Did he really treat himself as an elder? Now that he saw Chen Jinkai again, he suddenly had a sense of superiority. So what if he was his wife's uncle? So what if he was older than him? Wasn't he just a farmer who buried his head in the fields every day? Chapter 543. The Chen family's displeasure. Wu Chong was proud in his heart, and he could not help but show it on his face. He was no longer as humble towards Chen Jinkai as before. Instead, he looked like he did not think much of him. Although the in-law's eldest uncle was the village chief of Yongfu village, he could not reach into town. His eldest cousin was now a farmer, and his second cousin was said to be working in some workshop. Oh, right, it's a workshop in Yongfu village. It's not very promising. In Wu Chong's opinion, there was something wrong with the Chen father and son's brains. They actually degraded themselves to be long-term workers in the village's workshop. What were they thinking? Wu Chong felt that his in-laws could no longer help him. He didn't care much about Qingyuan's visit today. However, he wanted to vent his secret pride. He just wanted to see Chen Jinkai's miserable state. Unexpectedly, Chen Jinkai was different from what he had imagined. He seemed to be very happy with the hoe. Wu Chong could not vent the joy in his heart, so his face remained dark. Chen Yulan came back at this time. When Wu Chong saw her, he wanted to return to town as soon as possible. He didn't even want to stay for dinner. However, Chen Yulan didn't agree. Mom isn't back yet. Let's have lunch before we leave. I saw that eldest aunt and sister-in-law are busy in the kitchen. It's not good to leave just like that. Madame Wei happened to hear this when she came in with a teapot to add water to them. She pursed her lips secretly. When she returned to the kitchen, she could not help but mutter to Madame Song. She knew that we were busy in the kitchen, but she didn't come in to help. Didn't you see that young master's eyes were almost rolling up to the sky? I didn't know before, but now I realize that he's just a superficial person. Madame Song snorted coldly. As she picked the vegetables, she said, "What's so strange about that? I already said that the Wu family is not a good match. Second aunt still thinks that I'm a busybody." The two sisters-in-law also had small conflicts on a daily basis, especially after they lived together at home. They often disliked each other. However, now that they were facing a common enemy, it was obvious that they really did not welcome the visitors. Madame Zhou berated, "All right, it's rare for her to come. It's only a meal. They'll leave after eating." Madame Wei muttered softly, "She's not willing to eat at our place. If it weren't for the fact that second aunt isn't back yet, they might have gone back." Madame Zhou paused. His second aunt isn't back yet? Where did she go in such a short time? There's no family in the village that she's especially close to. She couldn't figure it out. Madame Fang didn't like to go out in the past. After Qin Yulan got married, she only came back once or twice. At most, she would stay in their house and leave in less than 4 hours. This time, she said that she would accompany Yulan to meet her friends, but Yulan was already back. Where else could Madame Fang go? Madame Zhou and the others did not know that Madame Fang, whom they had missed, was at home not far from them. Not only her, but Jiang Yongkong was also at home. At this moment, the two of them were criticizing each other without showing any weakness. Madame Fang wanted to push the blame to him. "Gu Dajiang is indeed back. You haven't made any progress for so long. It's too late to do anything now. Let's not waste time and return to town." Jiang Yongkong was so angry that he wanted to laugh. "All right, they'll go back then. Where's the money? I spent so much time and I've stayed in this lousy place in the countryside for so long that I have lost weight twice. I can't possibly not get any benefits, right?" The two of them were so engrossed in their fight that they did not notice that someone was hiding outside with a cloth bag in his hand. Chapter 544. Something must have happened. Tong Ping did not follow Madame Fang to collect the fruits today. After receiving Gu Yundong's instructions, he quietly followed behind Madame Fang. When he saw her enter the courtyard, he sneaked to the back of the house when no one was looking. the wall here was much shorter, and one of the parts had collapsed. It was accidentally pushed down by too many people on Qingyuan's wedding day. Madame Fang didn't repair it. Anyway, she was going to live in town. Although Jiang Yongkang moved in later, this wasn't his house, so he wasn't willing to pay so much money to repair it. Anyway, this was the backyard, so it didn't affect him much. Now, the wall was convenient for Tong Ping. With a little force, he quietly climbed in. Hearing the low-pitched argument coming from the house, Tong Ping shook the cloth bag in his hand and chuckled. After a while, not only did he hear the quarrel in the house, but he also heard the sound of footsteps coming from outside the courtyard. He knew that the time had come. He opened the cloth bag and pulled out a snake. The snake was emerald green in color, slender and long, about a meter long. At this moment, it was being dragged by Tong Ping, and it even wriggled a little uneasily. Tong Ping smiled. While the people inside were still talking, he stuffed the snake into the window. The snake's color was very conspicuous. Almost as soon as it appeared, the people in the room noticed it. A terrified scream sounded as expected. Tong Ping covered his mouth and laughed, but soon frowned. That's not right. Why is it a male voice? He secretly looked inside and his mouth twitched. In the room, Jiang Yongkang's face was pale. He pointed at the snake and quickly pounced into Madame Fang's arms. Cold sweat dripped down, and his lips trembled. Snake, snake, how can there be a snake? Quickly chase it away, quickly chase it away, ah! His terrified voice was unidentifiable as he hugged Madame Fang tightly. Madame Fang almost couldn't breathe. Compared to his scream of fear, Madame Fang was much calmer. Although she was a woman and usually did not go to the fields, she was not a lazy person. Sometimes, snakes would slither in her courtyard. She was already used to encountering snakes, insects, rats, and ants in the countryside. Although she was shocked by the sudden appearance of this snake at first, she quickly calmed down after seeing it clearly. Let go. What are you afraid of? This is an emerald green snake. It's not poisonous and is especially timid. Look, it's frightened by. Jiang Yongkang shook his head desperately. He didn't hear what she said at all. He felt that his heart was about to jump out of his chest. He closed his eyes and didn't even look. Hurry up and chase it away. I told you that I can't stay in this countryside. I won't come to this godforsaken place again. He had lived in town since he was young. He was not afraid of encountering a rat, but he was afraid of this slippery thing. Madame Fang's eyes lit up. He was so afraid of snakes, so she could use it to threaten him to return to town quickly. She thought quickly in her heart, but she didn't know that at this moment, a few people were passing by the entrance of their courtyard and happened to hear Jiang Yongkang scream, which was so loud that it almost shook the roof. The people who were about to pass by trembled and looked at each other. One of them immediately said worriedly, "It seems to be Brother Jiang's voice. He's screaming so badly. Could something have happened? Something must have happened. Maybe a thief broke in. Let's go in and take a look." Chapter 545. Revealing the adultery. The few of them immediately became anxious and went to push open the courtyard door without saying anything. The door was pushed open. No one thought too much about it. After all, it was broad daylight, and no one locked the courtyard in the countryside. As they entered the courtyard, they heard frightened voices coming from the room on the left. Everyone became even more worried. They rushed over and pushed open the door. "Brother Jiang, why are you?" He stopped mid-sentence. Everyone at the door looked at the two people hugging each other in shock. They did not even notice the green snake slithering away through the door in fear. At this moment, Jiang Yongkang was so afraid that he even placed his legs on Madame Fang's waist. Madame Fang could not withstand his weight and fell back onto the bed. In addition, she wanted to push him away and make him let go of her. Their clothes were loose and even their breathing was messy. In everyone's eyes, these two people were doing shameless things in broad daylight. The people at the door couldn't help but gasp. Madame Fang and Jiang Yongkang were also stunned. Their faces instantly turned pale, and there was only one thought in their minds: it was over. Both sides seemed to have come to a standstill until someone's sharp voice sounded. "You, the guy from Qin Tian's family, what are you doing?" Madame Fang trembled and Jiang Yongkong finally let go of her. Hearing this question, he hurriedly explained, "You've misunderstood. There's nothing between me and sister-in-law Chen. Just now, a snake came in. I was afraid, so I lost control." "Oh, who would believe that?" Soon, a mocking voice sounded. "A snake? Where is the snake? Why didn't we see it? Besides, even if there is a snake, it's a fact that you're in the same room. Could it be that the snake chased you into the room together?" Jiang Yongkong was speechless for a moment. He explained awkwardly, "We have something to discuss, so what important matter do you have to discuss in the room alone? Tell us." What else can it be? A man and a woman in the same room. Don't tell everyone that you don't know what it is. It's a big matter of giving birth." Ha. The two women echoed each other. Madame Fang looked at them. These two were just two gossipy women who usually didn't get along with her. Why did she have to see them? What should he say? How should he explain? Madame Fang's mind went blank for a moment, not knowing what to do. Jiang Yongkong was also so anxious that his head was covered in sweat. He couldn't say anything and could only deny it without any confidence. "You've really misunderstood. We're fine. It's just that sister-in-law Fang wanted to go home to get something." "Yes, she wanted to go home to get something, so we ran into each other. Later, we encountered a snake, so we became like this out of fear." However, this explanation was not convincing at all. She came back to get something? Why did she come over personally? I heard that her son-in-law came over today. She knew that there was a man living at her home, so she should let her son-in-law come over to get it. I think it's clearly the two of you meeting here privately, right? I couldn't tell, Madame Fang. Everyone thought that you had kept your chastity for your Qingyuan for so many years. I didn't expect you to have a lover long ago. No wonder Jiang Yongkong stayed at Madame Fang's house when there were so many choices. It turns out that he knew her long ago. Madame Fang's ears were buzzing and she felt a little lightheaded. She subconsciously wanted to tell the truth. No, we didn't. We were just discussing how to. Chapter 546. Discussing the marriage. Before she could finish speaking, a raised voice suddenly came from outside. "Mother, what's going on?" The people by the door turned around and saw Chen Liang walking over with a dark expression. It was unknown who went to call him. Looking at Chen Liang's expression, he probably knew the gist of the matter. She was not the only one who came. The Chen family had also come. Madame Zhou felt that she had lost all her face, but this person was her sister-in-law. She could only take a few steps forward and pull Madame Fang to the side to keep a distance from Jiang Yongkong. At the same time, she tugged at her slightly torn clothes. Chen Yulan ran to Madame Fang's side, patted her back, and comforted her in a low voice. Madame Zhou stood to the side, unwilling to get involved with her. Chen Liang's heavy gaze landed on Jiang Yongkong. What exactly happened? Jiang Yongkong thought that since Chen Liang was Madame Fang's eldest uncle, he should be on her side, so he quickly told him the excuse he had just said. However, just as he finished speaking, someone sneered. Naturally, Chen Liang did not believe it. His expression darkened even more. His sharp gaze landed on Madame Fang. "What did you come back for?" Madame Fang stiffened and opened her mouth, unable to speak for a long time. She did not leave anything in the courtyard at all. When she moved to town, she packed everything and left. Where could she find something? She searched her clothes. Other than a handkerchief and a little silver, there was nothing else. Could it be that she would come back to find these two things? Not to mention that others did not believe her, even she did not believe it herself. However, Chen Liang had completely lost his patience. He suddenly shouted, "Speak!" Madame Fang was shocked and her mind started to be in a mess again. She opened her mouth and said, I didn't. We have something to discuss." Jiang Yongkong almost died from her stupidity. He had finally found an excuse, so she should have continued the story. Then, she would casually say that the things she wanted to take were gone for some reason. Could it be that Chen Liang, the eldest uncle, really dared to take his sister-in-law to the pond? Chen Liang's voice became even colder. "Discuss what?" "We discussed." Before Madame Fang could finish, Qingyuan, who was hugging her, whispered in her ear, "Mother, admit your relationship with Uncle Jiang." Madame Fang looked at her in shock, but Qingyuan was a little anxious. "Are you really going to say that you're plotting against the Gu family? It's hard to say if others will believe it, but Gu Yundong will definitely settle scores with us. The Gu family is rich now, and young Master Liu is backing them up. They can crush us like ants. We can't have anything to do with them. Most importantly, if the Gu family's matter was brought up, she would definitely be implicated. At that time, everyone would know that she was vicious. How could the Wu family tolerate her? But Madame Fang was still hesitating. How could she admit to having a relationship with Jiang Yongkong? If she admitted it, what would happen to her in the future? However, Qingyuan couldn't care less. Seeing that she didn't say anything for a long time, she simply said, "My mother was indeed talking to Uncle Jiang. They were discussing their marriage." Madame Fang was stunned, and so was Jiang Yongkong. Chen Liang and the Chen family were also stunned. The surrounding villagers widened their eyes in shock. Discuss the marriage? Madame Fang wanted to deny it, but Qingyuan grabbed her hand. She still said before Madame Fang could, "Yes, uncle. This was my idea." Chapter 547. Her good daughter Chen Liang frowned and turned to look at Qingyuan. The latter looked calm and said slowly, "I'm already married. Now, my life is blissful and my family is happy. However, my mother is alone. She stays in the courtyard in town and doesn't even have anyone to talk to. My heart aches for her. Uncle, you said before that as long as she meets a suitable person, you won't object to my mother remarrying, right?" Chen Liang nodded. He was not an unreasonable person. His second brother had died early, and Madame Fang was still young. If she found someone to live with, she would have someone to rely on in the future. Qingyuan sighed and said, "Uncle, you know that my mother is doing this for me. All these years, she has been gritting her teeth and holding on to this family. She has never mentioned marrying again, for fear of making me suffer. But now that I'm married, it's time for her to let go. I advised her to find another partner and live with him in the future. When she grows old, she will have someone to take care of her. Previously, when I got to know Uncle Jiang, I thought that he was a good person and someone to rely on. His family is in town, so it's convenient for her to see my mother. That's why I advised my mother to consider it. My mother thinks that she's already so old. There's no need to make such a big deal out of it. She wanted to discuss it with Uncle Jiang first. If they don't have any objections, then the two families can gather at a table for a meal and get to know each other. No one expected that they would meet a snake just after talking for a while. It's such a coincidence." Now that the imperial court was encouraging widows to remarry, it was not shameful for Madame Fang to find another man to live with. Qingyuan's words made people feel that she was quite sensible and filial. Of course, there were also people who remained suspicious. But so what if they suspected? The two of them were indeed together, so there would only be two outcomes. One was that they got married, and the other was that they were captured and sunk in the pond. Chen Liang was the village chief and Madame Fang's eldest son-in-law. He would definitely not take her to the pond. Besides, there was no such rule in their village. They said that it was a punishment like sinking into a pond or burning to death. They were just scaring people. If they really killed someone like this, they would have nightmares at night. On the other hand, Jiang Yongkong and Madame Fang were a little stunned. Of course, Jiang Yongkong didn't want to marry Madame Fang. He didn't have a good impression of her. However, Qingyuan glared at him. She gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "If you want to die, just deny it. Then, tell them about the Gu family and see if they will kill you." Jiang Yongkong shuddered and fell silent. Madame Fang felt her entire body turn cold as she looked at her daughter in disbelief. She actually wanted to push her mother to Jiang Yongkong? Did she want her mother to be with this man? Was she crazy? However, Qingyuan said in a low voice, "Mother, let's get over this matter first." Madame Fang opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but she was speechless. Chen Liang secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Regardless of whether the other villagers present believed it or not, this explanation was still reasonable. He looked at Madame Fang and then at Jiang Yongkang before saying, "I really don't mind sister-in-law marrying again. Since things have developed to this point, let's sit down and discuss it." The villagers were still discussing. No matter what, they looked at Madame Fang with disdain. The image of a chaste woman that Madame Fang had maintained in the village for so many years was completely shattered. Seeing that he had heard enough, Tong Ping quietly climbed over the broken wall and ran back to the Gu residence. Chapter 548, Fatal Hidden Danger at the Gu residence. Liu Wei had not left yet. He seemed to be very interested in Gu Dajiang. He followed behind him and chattered non-stop, asking many questions. Gu Yundong only felt that his ears were buzzing with the guy's voice. She stayed for a while before leaving. At first, Gu Dajiang was interested. He felt that this young man was extroverted and quite enthusiastic. He was knowledgeable and could pick up any topic. But not long after, Gu Dajiang's face was filled with disdain. Gu Dajiang didn't want to talk to him. He just wanted to be alone with Lun Yang. This person was simply too blind. He wouldn't feel embarrassed even if he was squeezed in the middle as a shiny third wheel. No wonder he hadn't gotten a wife yet. When Tong Ping returned, he could still hear Lu Wei's exaggerated laughter. He trembled slightly and hurried to report the situation to Gu Yundong. Jiang Yongkang and Madame Fang were caught red-handed. According to misinstructions, Zhao Dafa led those women who didn't get along with Madame Fang to pass by her courtyard. They heard Jiang Yongkang's cry and rushed in. The two people in the house happened to be hugging each other. Gu Yundong nodded as she listened. When she heard this, she was slightly stunned. Jiang Yongkang's cry? Tong Ping coughed lightly, and the expression on his face could not be controlled. Yes, Madame Fang has lived here since she was young. She could tell at a glance that the snake was not poisonous. Jiang Yongkang was so frightened that his face turned pale, and he jumped onto Madame Fang. Gu Yundong was speechless. Jump onto her? She held back her jaw, which was about to fall, and let Tong Ping continue. After hearing that, she couldn't help but sneer. Qingyuan is really her mother's good daughter. In order to clear her name, she directly made her mother and Jiang Yongkang a couple. That was why Tong Ping was dissatisfied. So we only took care of those two? Qingyuan escaped just like that? I think all the bad ideas came from her. She's the culprit. Don't worry. Her mother did such a thing. Even if Qingyuan helps her, how many people can really be convinced? Her reputation in the village has already been ruined. Moreover, she's with Jiang Yongkang now. She's no longer a member of the Chen family. If Chen Liang doesn't treat her as his brother's wife, I'm afraid he won't protect Qingyuan like before. This matter also affected Chen Liang. After all, Madame Fang was still a member of the Chen family. Fortunately, there were no suitable men and women in the Chen family who had to marry. When Yo Dan and the others grew up and got married, this matter would have long been forgotten. Coupled with the fact that Chen Liang was the village chief, he still had some prestige in Yongfu village. No one dared to criticize him. However, Madame Zhou and her daughter-in-law would probably be mocked. Although Gu Yundong had a good relationship with the Chen family, she could not let Madame Fang off so easily just because of a few words. That would only make them push their luck. She was just giving them a taste of their own medicine. Wasn't Madame Fang and Jiang Yongkang a match made in heaven? As for Qingyuan, she was anxious to clear her name, but she forgot that besides the villagers of Yongfu village, her husband was also present. In fact, Wuchong was the one who felt most embarrassed about what had happened to Madame Fang. As Madame Fang's son-in-law, he saw his mother-in-law who was actually caught secretly meeting someone at such an old age. He felt that he had lost all his face. Therefore, the hidden danger that Qingyuan had planted was the most fatal. Chapter 549. The End of the Fang Mother and Daughter. Keep an eye on them and see what happens next, Gu Yundong instructed Tong Ping. After listening to her analysis, Tong Ping's blood immediately boiled, and he no longer felt indignant. Sure enough, 2 days later, Tong Ping heard the latest news. Madame Fang and Jiang Yongkang were indeed together. The two of them had returned to town. The small courtyard where Madame Fang had originally lived had also been cancelled. She was now living in Jiang Yongkang's house. Because they were husband and wife halfway, Jiang Yongkang's son and daughter-in-law were very awkward and couldn't accept it. However, with another labor at home, it was much easier. The clothes of the Jiang family were washed by Madame Fang, and even Jiang Yongkang's grandson was raised by Madame Fang. Madame Fang was petty and lazy, so she naturally had to refuse. However, Jiang Yongkang had no feelings for her. Not only did he not help her, but he was also wary of her. Madame Fang was furious. She wanted to go back to Yongfu village to seek justice from her late husband's brother, who was the village chief, but she quickly realized that she was not a member of the Chen family. She wanted to go back to her maternal family to get her brothers, but her maternal family despised her for losing face. She was already so old, but she still did such a thing. Other than her mother scolding Jiang Yongkang, no one paid attention to her. However, Jiang Yongkang had always been a scheming person. In order to hook up with Madame Yang these few months, he could be said to have a pure heart and few desires in Yongfu village. Now that he had returned to town, his original lover started going out with him again. He did not go home all day. Although Madame Fang hated him very much, since the two of them were married, he was her man. How could he flirt with women outside all day and let her be an old maid at home? Madame Fang was also ruthless. She directly told on Jiang Yongkang's lover's husband. Jiang Yongkang's affair was exposed again and he was beaten up by that man. His legs were broken, so he could only lie in bed and recuperate. He could not cause trouble anymore. He quarreled with Madame Fang at home every day and they gradually started to fight. The two of them were constantly injured and did not have a good time. As for Qingyuan, she was treated coldly after she followed Wu Chong back to the Wu family. Wu Chong felt that if his mother-in-law could do such a thing, what about Qingyuan, who had relied on his mother-in-law since she was young? Was she also a restless woman? Since that day, he was not very willing to touch her. Anyway, there was nothing to be afraid of in the Chen family now. He began to have no scruples when doing things. The Wu family also had an understanding of the Fang family, especially after Wu Chong's subjective depiction. The Wu family unanimously believed that Madame Fang was unruly and had embarrassed their family. If Chen Yulan had done anything wrong, the Wu family would have divorced her. They hadn't divorced yet, but Chen Yulan's life had become exceptionally difficult. Not long after, Wu Chong had another woman outside. When that woman got pregnant, she was directly brought into the Wu family and even wanted to be his equal wife. Chen Yulan made a scene because of this and even ran back to the Chen family to ask Chen Liang to stand up for her. Although Chen Liang was extremely disappointed in the mother and daughter, Chen Yulan was still his brother's daughter after all. He still went to the Wu family to reprimand Wu Chong. Wu Chong did not take Chen Liang seriously at all. He scolded him for being a busybody and even said that he wanted to divorce his wife. Chen Yulan was scared when she heard that. She turned around and chased Chen Liang away. Chen Liang had expected better from her and no longer cared about Chen Yulan. However, Wu Chong didn't mention that woman as his equal wife again. Although she was a concubine, her status was much higher than Chen Yulan's. Of course, this was all in the future. At this moment, Gu Yundong only instructed Tong Ping to keep an eye on Madame Fang and her daughter. She then let go and did not care anymore. After Tong Ping left, she realized that Liu Wei and Gu Dajiang had stopped talking. A low sigh suddenly came from behind. Chapter 550. The loyal Liu Wei. Gu Yundong turned her head and saw that Liu Wei looked exhausted, as if he had done something big. She did not want to ask him why he was sighing, because Gu Yundong knew very well that the answer was definitely not what she wanted to hear. However, even though she didn't ask, Liu Wei spoke first. "It's really not easy for me to do this for my brother." Seeing the puzzled look on Gu Yundong's face, he immediately explained, "From the moment I met Uncle Gu, I knew that he definitely did not like my brother Shao as a son-in-law. For my brother, I have a lot to do. I tried my best to get close to Uncle Gu, trying to figure out Uncle Gus's personality and preferences. I'll tell brother Shao later and let him be mentally prepared. When the time comes, he can cater to your father's liking and achieve twice the results with half the effort. How is it? I've contributed so much for you two's future." Isn't it impressive? Gu Yundong looked up at the sky. After a long time, she said faintly, "My father reads books. And then, he thinks that you are a product of those who you hang around. You are the same as the friends you make," Gu Yundong said with great difficulty. Previously, I had always instilled in my father the impression that Shao Qingyuan was a steady, responsible, taciturn, but practical person. Now, it seems that everything has been overturned by you. Liu Wei blinked, then blinked again. That didn't sound right. Gu Yundong, are you saying that I'm unreliable, irresponsible, and nagging? Liu Wei was furious. Have you forgotten who helped you manage the workshop when you weren't in Yongfu village? Gu Yundong immediately denied it. That's not what I meant. It is. Liu Wei was furious and raised his voice, but there was an inexplicable hint of guilt in his voice. In the end, he was still a little nervous. Could it be that he had really done something bad out of goodwill? Damn it. If Uncle Gu really felt that Shao Qingyuan was a good-for-nothing, wouldn't he have broken up his brother's marriage? Liu Wei laughed bitterly in his heart, but on the surface, he was bluffing. Let me tell you, you're humiliating me. I'm very angry. I won't forgive you. Don't look for me in the future. With that, he rushed out of the Gu family's courtyard, climbed into his carriage, and left. Gu Yundong was speechless. He seemed to be the one who came to Yongfu village to look for her all the time, right? Aunt Ku slowly walked out from behind. She could not help but glare at Gu Yundong. Why are you scaring him? Aunt Ku seems to like Liu Wei. It can't be helped. After interacting with a black-hearted glutinous rice ball like you for a long time, his sincerity is commendable. Gu Yundong laughed. Did she treat him as a child like Yunshu and Yunka? She wanted Aunt Ku to wake up. After all, he was the eldest young master of the Liu family. Although he was a little silly, it was impossible to say that he was not shrewd at all. At the very least, he was a drama queen. However, when she looked up, she realized that Aunt K's expression was solemn and reluctant. Gu Yundong's heart skipped a beat and her voice softened. Aunt, what's wrong? Is there something on your mind? Or did something happen? Tell me. As long as I can do it, I will definitely do it. Aunt Ku sighed slightly. She looked at Gu Yundong, who seemed to want to say something but hesitated. It seemed that there were some words that she had been hiding in her heart for a long time. Now that she wanted to say it, she actually did not know where to start. Aunt Thu. Chapter 551. Auntie Ku is leaving Yundong. Aunt Ku interrupted her. I'm very happy to hear you say that. It's not in vain that I've treated you sincerely. Gu Yundong frowned and heard her continue, but I should go. Go? What do you mean? Back then, I stayed in the Gu family because you wanted to go out to look for your father and Imperial Physician Song. I was worried about Yunshu and Yunka, so I stayed in the Gu family to take care of them. Your father has been found, and you can also contact Imperial Physician Song. In the future, you don't have to worry about the two children when you go out. Naturally, I should go home. Gu Yundong was caught off guard. She really did not expect Aunt Ku to say goodbye. Why should you go back? Aunt, you're alone at home. Yunshu and Kiki are here to accompany you. Besides, we've long treated you as family and plan to support you in your old age. I know. Aunt K's expression softened. These days, she had also treated these children as family. Although I can't bear to Yundong, I should go back. Aunt K's expression was serious and her eyes were stubborn. The Gu family did not treat her as an outsider, but she had a family after all. She also had relatives. Putting everything else aside, just the fact that she still had Nie Tsong, her nephew, to support her in her old age meant that the Nie family would definitely bring her back without a word. If she stayed in the Gu family and let the completely unrelated Gu Yundong take care of her in her old age, what would that count for? The Nie family would be criticized. Moreover, it was also very awkward for her to continue living in the Gu family. Gu Yundong was silent. She lowered her head slightly, as if she did not want to talk to Aunt Ku. She seemed to be throwing a tantrum. Aunt Ku wanted to laugh. You're actually so childish. Alright, I know how you feel. It's not like we can't see each other in the future. The Prefectural city isn't far from here. When I miss you guys, I can just come over again. My body is very strong. It won't be a problem for me to travel back and forth. Gu Yundong pursed her lips and did not want to speak. After a long time, she wiped her face. Alright, since you've made up your mind, I'll respect your choice. However, I won't care about Kiki and Yunshu. And, go convince them yourself. She was indeed black-hearted. Auntie had thought that she was a little cute just now, but she immediately revealed her true colors. However, she had already dealt with Gu Yundong. Could it be that she could not deal with Yunshu and Yunka? That night, when Yunshu returned home from school, Auntie had a very deep conversation with the two children. Of course, the two of them couldn't bear to part with her, especially Kiki. She was crying so hard that her face was smudged. The young lady was the person who interacted with Auntie the most. When Gu Yundong left Yongfu village, it was Auntie who took care of her. After interacting for a long time, they developed feelings for each other and were used to it. When she suddenly wanted to leave, the young lady burst into tears. Auntie comforted her for a long time before she nodded obediently with tears in her eyes. She stayed in her arms for the entire night and refused to leave. Auntie was helpless and happy. She hugged the little girl's soft body and said to Gu Yundong, "Tomorrow. I'll leave tomorrow morning." Gu Yundong was expressionless. "Not tomorrow. My father still has to go to Yunshu's school tomorrow. The carriage is unavailable." Gu Dajiang, who had been watching from the beginning to the end, immediately nodded solemnly. "I have to visit Yunshu's master. After tomorrow, Yunshu and the others will be on leave. I can't delay any longer. Otherwise, old master will think that our family is insincere." Old master? Chapter 552. Where's the old master? Gu Yundong felt that his father had misunderstood something, but she could not be bothered to clarify it now. She only said to Auntie, "Yes, that's what happened." Auntie held her forehead. The Gu family had 3 carriages. Could it be that they could not spare one? Even if it was an excuse, they should find an acceptable one, right? However, the little girl in her arms hugged her neck tightly. Her soft voice was simply irresistible. "Aunt, can you leave a few days later?" Kiki's heart aches. Okay. Auntie quickly agreed. "A few days later is fine." Forget it. It was quite sudden to bring this up, so it was good to give each other some time. The matter was settled, but the matter of Gu Dajiang visiting Yunshu and Yuanzhi's teacher could not be delayed. As the father, it was his responsibility. The next day, Gu Dajiang took a few cans and placed them in the carriage. In the end, he asked Yunshu worriedly, "Are you sure that your teacher really likes this?" Gu Yunshu nodded affirmatively. "I do. I once saw him eat a full jar and still want to eat more." Gu Dajiang couldn't help but frown. Was it not good for an old man to eat such sweet food? However, since both Yundong and Yunshu said so, it must be true. After everything was prepared, Gu Dajiang got into the carriage. Gu Yundong was also going. She had to go to the shop to look for Zhenggang and Zhuangzi. She had to discuss the matter of opening a shop in the prefectural city. Before leaving, she looked at the Shao family again. Shao Qingyuan still had not returned. Gu Yundong could not help but feel worried. It had been a few days. Why was he still not back? In the past, he had also entered the mountains, but he would return in 3 days at most. It was already the 4th day. If Mao and the other 3 had not followed him, Gu Yundong would not have been able to sit still and would have gone into the mountains to look for them. Yundong? Gu Dajiang's voice sounded in her ears. Gu Yundong suddenly came back to her senses and realized that the carriage had arrived at the county city. Gu Dajiang looked at her worriedly. "Do you want to go to school with me first, or go straight to the shop?" "Let's go to school first." Father Tong, who was outside, heard the order and immediately drove to the left. At the entrance of the school, Gu Dajiang got out of the carriage first. He checked his clothes again and again. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, he went forward and knocked on the door. It was the same gatekeeper. He knew Gu Yundong and recognized Gu Dajiang. Hearing that they had specially come to visit Sir, he quickly led them inside. After all, Gu Yundong had always been unimpeded when she came over. Yunshu and Yuanzhi waved at them and walked towards the room with their classmates who had also come. Gu Dajiang and his daughter turned around and headed for Qin Wenzhang's study. Qin Wenzhang's servant was standing at the door. He was very happy to see Gu Yundong. "Miss Gu, you're here?" "Yes, my father just came back and wanted to visit your master." The servant took another look at Gu Dajiang and smiled. "Young Master Gu mentioned that." "Master Gu, Miss Gu, wait a moment. I'll report it now." After saying that, he entered the study. After a while, there was a rustling sound. Soon, Qin Wenjing came out. "Master Gu, I've heard a lot about you. We've finally met." Qin Wenjing stepped forward and laughed, cupping his hands slightly. Gu Dajiang was speechless. Who was this? Chapter 553. Don't Chase Celebrities. Qin Wenjing looked up and was stunned when he saw that Gu Dajiang did not move. Gu Yundong tugged at his sleeve. Gu Dajiang suddenly came back to his senses and hurriedly cupped his hands in greeting. Then he said, "Please inform your master that Gu Dajiang has come to visit." Qin Wenjing. Gu Yundong was speechless. "Ahem, well, father." Gu Yundong recalled that her father had addressed Yunshu's teacher as old master yesterday. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. "This is Yunshu's teacher." Gu Dajiang's eyes widened as he blurted out, "Isn't Yunshu's teacher old master?" "Dad, who told you he's an old man?" Gu Dajiang paused. "But didn't you say that he was the top scholar a few years ago?" "I read the court newspaper. Every top scholar for nearly 15 years is above 40 years old. But he's only—" He paused and suddenly thought of something. He frowned and said, "There's a young genius. He did become the top scholar a few years ago. But didn't that young man surnamed Qin die of illness?" Qin Wenjing touched his nose, coughed lightly, and said, "If I'm not wrong, I should be that young man surnamed Qin Wenjing." Gu Dajiang suddenly looked at him, his eyes burning. However, his body didn't move, as if he was frozen. "Father, Qin Wenjing should be quite normal-looking, right? Was he that scary?" Qin Wenjing could not help but look at Gu Yundong and explain, "Previously, I did resign for some reasons. There were rumors that I had passed away from illness. I didn't expect this rumor to spread to the Yongning Prefecture. You misunderstood." You're really Qin Wenjing?" After a long while, Gu Dajiang finally reacted. His throat was extremely dry, and his voice was hoarse. Qin Wenjing nodded. "I'm indeed Qin Wenjing. Miss Gu can testify." Gu Dajiang turned his head and stared at his daughter in a daze. Seeing her nod, he couldn't help but ask, "Why didn't you tell me that Yunshu's teacher is called Qin Wenjing?" "I'm afraid father will say that it's impolite for me to call the teacher by his name." There were many rules for scholars, especially when it came to respecting teachers. Qin Wenjing was Gu Yunshu's teacher, so it was better for her not to be too casual. Who knew that her father would misunderstand that the other party was an old man? Gu Yundong secretly laughed. When she looked up again, she saw her father looking at Qin Wenjing excitedly. The light in his eyes was almost blinding. "Master Qin, Mr. Qin, Mr. Qin, I didn't expect to see you again in my lifetime. This is simply great. You've even become my son's master." But the essay of the Master's Palace examination was excerpted by someone. "I was lucky to be able to read it and admire your literary talent. At that time, I thought that if I could meet you one day and ask you for guidance on the essay, I would have no regrets in my life." "I didn't expect it to be true." Gu Yundong widened her eyes. "No, father, the other party is a scheming person without any integrity. He is not worthy of your admiration. Wake up quickly." "Father, well, you've seen Yunshu's teacher. Shouldn't we go?" Gu Dajiang didn't even turn around. No, I still have a lot to talk to you about. If you don't mind, can you treat me to a cup of tea?" "I don't mind." Qin Wenjing glanced at Gu Yundong and immediately agreed. Gu Yundong felt terrible. "Father, where's your composure? You're already so old. Don't chase after celebrities anymore, right?" Chapter 554. Wishes are about to come true. Gu Yundong tried a few times, but in the end, she could not take Gu Dajiang away. She could only leave him in the Qin family to exchange knowledge with Qin Wenjing. She sighed as she walked out of the Qin family school and looked up at the sky. The power of an idol was so great that her father's personality had changed. It was so great that she felt that her status in her father's heart was starting to become precarious. Gu Yundong turned to look at the Qin family's door again before striding forward and entering the carriage. The car drove towards Gus. Not long after, it stopped at the entrance of Gus. When Yuanzhi saw the familiar carriage, he came forward without a word. It was indeed Gu Yundong. He quickly reached out to help her. After being glared at by Gu Yundong, he retracted his hand in embarrassment. Gus' business was quite good. The Gu family's workshop sent fresh goods over every day and they were sold very quickly. When Gu Yundong entered, there were still a few people watching in the shop. It was different from buying white sugar in the past. Women were more interested in dried fruit shops. Therefore, from time to time, there would be well-dressed women coming to the shop. Whether it was food or sweets, they contributed to a large portion of the sales. The moment Gu Yundong entered, she went straight to the counter. The women were a little surprised. They did not know her identity and whispered a few words. Yuanzhi quickly helped them buy the things. Then, he ran over and asked, "Boss, why are you here? Did you write this?" Gu Yundong looked down and found a few pieces of paper. She raised her eyebrows slightly when she saw the gradually smoothing handwriting. Yuanzhi stuck his head out to take a look and immediately chuckled. "I wrote it. How is it, boss? Did I improve a lot?" He felt that it was not bad. He was someone who was determined to be a shopkeeper. Gu Yundong glanced at him and saw Xinggang coming out of the backyard with the account book. He must have gone to check the goods. He was stunned when he saw Gu Yundong. "Boss is here." "Yes, Uncle Zheng. I came here this time because I have something to tell you." Xinggang put the account book away. "Boss, feel free to let me know if you need anything." "It's like this." Gu Yundong sat on a chair in the reception area with him. As he drank the tea that Yuanzhi had poured, he said, "I plan to open another Gus in the Prefectural city. As you know, although the business of this shop in the county city is good, its demand is limited. There are only so many people in the county city." Xinggang nodded. Indeed. He knew that the boss would expand Gus sooner or later. "You've done very well in Gus. There aren't many people I can trust, so I want to hand over Gus from the Prefectural city to you. Uncle Zheng has stayed in the Prefectural city for a few years before. You're familiar with the situation there and is the best candidate. Of course, it will be tiring at the beginning and there will be many miscellaneous matters. Uncle Zheng will have to work harder." However, Xinggang was slightly excited. Of course, he wanted to go to the Prefectural city. What was there to be afraid of? No matter how hard and tiring it was worth it to be able to achieve results. He was a man and had some career ambitions. Back then, when he was forced to return from the Prefectural city, the unwillingness in his heart tormented him for a few days. Now that he finally had a chance to stand up again, how could he not be happy? Hence, Xinggang quickly agreed. "Boss, I'll go." Yuanzhi, who had been wiping the same spot with a rag, could not help but get excited. If shopkeeper Zheng left, would his wish to be a shopkeeper be fulfilled? Chapter 555. Being a shopkeeper for 3 months suppressing his excitement, Zhuangzi's ears pricked up even more. He was getting closer and closer to Gu Yundong and Xinggang. In the end, he simply stood behind Xinggang and wiped the back of his chair with a cloth. Gu Yundong was speechless. "Could you be more obvious?" Xinggang did not know whether to laugh or cry. He simply asked on his behalf, "Boss, I'm naturally willing to go to the Prefectural city. Then how should we arrange the shop here?" Gu Yundong tapped her fingers on the table and glanced sideways at Zhuangzi, who had suddenly stopped nervously. She smiled and said, "Uncle Zheng, do you have any suggestions?" Actually, although this shop has only been open for less than a year, business has always been very good. There are many customers and most of them are regular customers. Therefore, it's better to use a familiar person to be the shopkeeper. Yuanzhi has been here since the shop opened. He's most familiar with this place and has feelings for it. The customers like him very much. Moreover, he has been learning calligraphy and writing with me these days. He has become more and more mature and steady. He's the most suitable person. Yuanzhi looked at Gang in a daze. The man's words moved him so much that his eyes turned red. He was usually very strict with her and would say that Yuanzhi was too slippery and not steady enough. Yuanzhi did not expect him to have such a high evaluation in front of his boss. Simply too evil. Yundong glanced at him and smiled. Actually, I've also considered Yuanzhi as the shopkeeper. Yuanzhi's body stiffened. After these days of training, he immediately understood the meaning behind Yundong's words. Has considered it? In other words, she was no longer considering it? Yuanzhi immediately felt a little disappointed and lowered his head weakly. Thinking about it, it made sense. After all, he was still young. How could he be promoted to shopkeeper after being a shop assistant for such a short period of time? However, he did not know what the new shopkeeper's personality was like. Was he easy to talk to? Was he like shopkeeper Zheng, who taught him how to read and write? Now that he thought about it, he suddenly realized that shopkeeper Zheng was really tolerant and concerned about him. He was usually a little strict with his words, but whenever there was anything delicious or useful, he would give Yuanzhi a portion. The more he thought about it, the more uncomfortable he felt. Yuanzhi felt like crying. Yundong quickly added, however, after thinking about it, there's another choice. No matter what, Yuanzhi needs to think it through himself. Yuanzhi was stunned. He blinked. What did that mean? What was the other choice? Boss, what do you want me to think about? Yundong smiled. Uncle Zheng is right. After he goes to the Prefectural city, this shop indeed needs a skilled person to manage it. You are the most suitable. Yuanzhi's heart, which had just sunk, suddenly came back to life. His eyes lit up. Yundong said, "You'll be the shopkeeper for 3 months." What? You won't let me be the shopkeeper after 3 months? Wasn't this too short? 3 months later, they'll give you 2 choices. One is to continue staying here as a shopkeeper. The other is to go to the Prefectural city and continue working under Uncle Zheng. You can decide what you want. Yuanzhi was dumbfounded. This choice was too difficult. He was too difficult. Boss, I have to think about this carefully. His mind was a little chaotic now. Being a shopkeeper had always been his dream. In the previous 15 minutes, this was still his ultimate goal. However, going to the Prefectural city did not seem like a bad idea. On the other hand, if he went there, he still had to be a shop assistant. After being a shopkeeper for 3 months, he would be demoted to a shop assistant. Chapter 556. New fellow Yundong took a sip of tea. There's no hurry. Take your time to consider. Tell me when you've thought it through. Oh, okay. Yuanzhi was stunned. He grabbed the rag and turned to leave. Yundong suddenly added, by the way, during the 3 months you'll be the shopkeeper, the new employee is called Chen. Take good care of him and let him get familiar with the job as soon as possible. The rag in Yuanzhi's hand fell to the ground. He turned his head and looked at Yundong in horror. He asked in disbelief, Boss, who are you talking about? Chen, the eldest son of the village chief. Yuanzhi's footsteps were a little unsteady. The Chen who always looked up to the sky every time he saw him? The Chen family's eldest son, whom he unconsciously bent down in front of, came over to be his assistant? At that time, he would probably be the waiter who was ordered around, right? No, how could he think that? That was in the past. Now it was the present. He was not afraid of the young masters and young ladies of the wealthy families in this county. Why would he be afraid of Chen? He was the shopkeeper. Yuanzhi suddenly thought of himself standing by the counter with his hands clasped and asking Chen to pour tea for him. Oh my God, just thinking about it made him feel good. Yundong did not know that his heart had been in turmoil for hundreds of rounds. When she saw Yuanzhi's expression, she could not help but ask, why? Is there a problem? No, there's no problem at all. They'll teach him how to be a suitable and polite assistant. Don't worry, I won't let Uncle Zheng down after such a long time of training. He straightened his back and patted his chest. Gu Yundong felt that his tone was a little strange, but she did not ask further. She just nodded and said, "All right, since there's no problem, prepare yourself in the next 2 days. While Uncle Zheng is still here, if you have any questions, ask as soon as possible. Learn to make accounts. Also, consider the previous question." "Yes, I understand, boss. I will definitely do my best." Zheng Gang also reassured her. "I will slowly let go these 2 days and let Zhuangzi learn to be independent. By the way, I don't know when that Chen Jinkai will come." "Tomorrow. I'll get him to come over tomorrow." As Gu Yundong spoke, she gave some instructions before leaving Gus. She bought some things on the street. Seeing that it was about time, she returned to Qin Wenzhang's school. Her father seemed to be still talking to Qin Wenjing. Even before Gu Yundong reached the door of the study, she could hear that hearty and happy laughter. She even heard Qin Wenzhang's laughter. The two of them were clearly talking happily as like-minded scholars. They had probably forgotten the time, right? She sighed slightly and simply turned around to go to the classroom where the students were studying. This was not the first time Gu Yundong had come to see her younger brother in class. In Qin Wenzhang's school, other than him, there was another teacher who taught books and a martial arts teacher. These two people were not old. They were the teachers that Qin Wenjing had personally found. After all, he had a lot of things to do. It was impossible for him to personally teach these students at all times. For example, right now, the teacher was teaching the students in the academy. Gu Yundong deliberately lightened her footsteps when she went over, afraid that she would disturb their studies. Unexpectedly, when she got closer, she didn't hear any sound. The usually loud reading sounds seemed to have disappeared all of a sudden. She was slightly stunned and could not help but speed up as she walked towards the classroom. Yes, there were more than 10 students. Chapter 557. Bian Yuanzi's change. However, they were not studying. Instead, they were playing chess. They were playing chess in pairs, either holding white pieces or black ones. They lowered their heads slightly and frowned seriously. Gu Yundong saw her younger brother at first glance. The little guy was holding a white piece and thinking hard. Opposite him sat Louis. Wasn't Louis an expert in chess? Yunshu, you've just come into contact with this area. Where did you get the courage to fight him? Gu Yundong stood outside the window and watched as the child held the chess piece and did not move for a long time. However, Louis, who was sitting opposite him, had excellent self-control. He did not rush the other party and just waited. On the other hand, Gu Yundong waited for a long time but did not see him place his piece. Finally, she turned to look at the others. Bian Yuanzhi was also playing chess. In front of him was the oldest student in the school, Yi Junkin, who had identified himself as everybody's elder brother. Yi Junkin was very patient. He taught Bian Yuanzhi, who had just entered the school and had a poor foundation, step by step. He even enjoyed this process of teaching. The last time Yunshu celebrated his birthday, he had taught Xingjia and the others very gently. It had almost made brother Xingjia and even Yodan call him teacher. Now that he was facing Bian Yuanzhi, he used all his patience to tell the guy what to do step by step from scratch. His voice was neither fast nor slow, as if the wind was blowing. Bian Yuanzhi, who was originally a little nervous, slowly relaxed. He followed his rhythm and changed from not daring to casually place a piece to being able to analyze the situation by himself. Gu Yundong felt very relieved as she watched Bian Yuanzhi gradually walk out of the shadow of the old Gu family. She had always been worried that after Bian Yuanzhi experienced those things, he would not be able to open his heart and accept others. He would feel that he was an outsider living under someone else's roof and live cautiously, not even daring to speak loudly. Fortunately, with Yunshu around, there were these cute classmates. When Gu Yundong returned from Wanqing Prefecture this time, she could clearly feel that he had become much more cheerful and confident. Studying was indeed very useful. Gu Yundong smiled, retracted her gaze, and looked at the others in the classroom. Other than a few impatient students who scratched their heads and ears and kept moving their butts, everybody looked very serious. Even though they were not very old, They looked like they were experienced when holding chess pieces. The teacher didn't care much either. He was reading a chess manual by himself. Occasionally, he would raise his head to take a look. Most of the time, he let the students play freely. Finally, Yundong looked at his younger brother again. Seeing that he finally placed the white piece in his hand slowly on the chessboard, she actually heaved a sigh of relief. When it was Liu Yi's turn, he moved quickly, picking up the black piece and placing it neatly. Yundong thought that her younger brother would probably have to wait for a long time. Unexpectedly, just as Liu Yi retracted his hand, he heard Yunshu's clear voice. "No, you can't do it here." Liu Yi was in a daze. He watched as Yunshu picked up the chess piece he had just placed and stuffed it back into his hand. He could not help but ask curiously, "Why can't I go down here?" Liu Yi looked at it carefully. It did not violate the rules. Wasn't it normal to play that move? Chapter 558. My big sister said it. He looked at Yunshu with sincerity and curiosity. Yunshu also told him very seriously, "Of course you can't go down here. Look, if you go down here I can only go down there. Then you go down here and then follow closely. To lose." Xia Yu, who was playing chess at the side, almost choked on his own saliva when he heard his words. Liu Yi was also speechless. "It's fine if you lose. I'm good at chess. It's normal that you can't compare to me. It's not embarrassing to lose. You've misunderstood. I'm not afraid of losing face. I'm actually doing this for your own good," Yunshu said sincerely and solemnly. This time, Liu Yi didn't quite understand. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. We're learning to play chess, so you definitely hope that the more you play, the better at it you become. If you play with me, won't it be boring to win in such a short time? But no one here is your match, so you're the only one you have to challenge." "Then how should I challenge myself?" Liu Yi asked humbly. "You have to turn the impossible into a possibility," Yunshu suggested kindly. "Look, your chess piece should be placed here, so I can stop you. Then do you think that it won't be so easy to win this chess game? You have to challenge this difficulty. Think about it. I made a lousy move, but I still have the ability to turn the tables. Wouldn't that be challenging yourself?" Liu Yi's eyes lit up. That makes sense. The people beside him actually felt that this theory was not wrong at all. Yundong's eyes almost popped out. This worked? Even the teacher, who was sitting not far away and reading the chess records, could not help but twitch his lips. He glanced at Yunshu and pitted Liu. As expected, Liu Yi really listened to his suggestion and placed the chess piece in the position that Yunshu had mentioned. Yunshu immediately placed the white chess piece happily. All right, it was Liu Yi's turn to frown and think for a long time. After 2 or 3 steps, Yunshu placed the white chess piece on the chessboard and jumped up from his seat. "I won, I won. Thank you everyone for your support and love for me. I couldn't get to where I am today without everyone's help and care, especially Liu. He sacrificed himself to help me. I'm so touched." He was overjoyed. He ran around the classroom, his face flushed with excitement. On the other side, Liu Yi was still holding the black piece with a dumbfounded expression. He won? Yunshu was overjoyed and ran back to Liu Yi's side. He patted his shoulder and comforted him. "It's all right. You just didn't succeed in challenging yourself. It's not embarrassing to lose to me." Yundong covered her face. No, this was not her brother. However, the teacher could not help but pick up a chess piece and throw it at him. "What are you happy about? It's an unfair victory," Yunshu said confidently and puffed out his chest. "Then do you think that what I said just now was wrong?" The teacher choked. "Really, seemed to be true. My elder sister said that it's my ability to fool people until they're crippled." The little guy looked very proud. Yundong, "No, I never said that. Don't spout nonsense. Now do you know how much you've led the children astray?" Qin Wenzheng's familiar voice suddenly came from behind. Yundong suddenly turned her head and saw that her father and Qin Wenzheng had arrived at some point. It seemed like they had watched the entire scene. Qin Wenzheng snorted. "Come over. I have something to tell you." Chapter 559. Plans for Gu Dajiang. Gu Yundong looked at Gu Dajiang guiltily. She really didn't. Yunshu had figured it out himself. She didn't teach her. She swore. Gu Dajiang didn't say anything, but his expression was very gentle. He didn't mean to blame her. Gu Yundong glanced at the classroom again before following Qingyuan to the side. What do you want to tell me? Gu Yundong asked. However, Qingyuan glanced at Gu Dajiang and asked her, Your father has already been found. What are your plans for him from now on? Plans? Gu Yundong found it strange. He's my father. I don't need to plan for him. My father can do whatever he wants. Then have you ever thought of letting him study at the academy again? Gu Yundong was stunned for a moment before her eyes lit up. That's right. His father liked to read so much that he could pick up the textbooks and study again. In the past, their family was poor. Now that the conditions allowed it, there was no problem at all. Gu Yundong thought in frustration that she had been restricted by her inherent thinking. After all, Gu Dajiang already had a son and a daughter. He had worked for so long that it was difficult for him to associate him with school. However, this was ancient times. Not to mention that Gu Dajiang was only in his early 30s, there were many people in their 60s or 70s who were still taking the elementary scholar examination. Why couldn't her father? Qingyuan said, I talked to your father for a long time and realized that he hasn't abandoned his books all these years. He's still hungry for knowledge. Moreover, he's indeed very talented in studying. He was delayed in the early years, but now that he's studying again, he can quickly get used to it. He seemed to like Gu Dajiang. Your father is very ambitious. All these years, he has been a small accountant in a restaurant. It's really wasting his talent. In my opinion, his knowledge is better than those elementary scholars. Yunshu's talent is probably inherited from him. He's a good seedling. Gu Yundong nodded. You're right. I'll persuade my father to study. After a pause, she suddenly thought of something and frowned. But there doesn't seem to be a suitable academy in Fengkai County. Qingyuan was teaching children here, and he was also very busy. Her father was not suitable to be here either. Dongyi Academy was also famous, but Gu Yundong did not like the atmosphere there, so she did not consider it at all. There was also the county school. However, her father had not even participated in the preparation scholar exam and could not meet the admission standards of the county school. The others were just some small private schools. The teachers were all elementary scholars. They only taught people how to read, so they couldn't teach Gu Dajiang. Qingyuan glanced at her and said coldly, Just you wait. With that, he turned around and left. Gu Yundong laughed and leaned against a pillar at the side. She really waited obediently. Not long after, Qingyuan walked back. This time, there was a letter in his hand. The mountain elder of Tianhai Academy in the prefectural city of the Shuanhe Prefecture has some ties with me. When the time comes, you and your father will bring this letter to visit him. As long as your father's knowledge passes his test, he can enter Tianhai Academy. Keep it well and don't drop it. Gu Yundong blinked. You want my father to study in the prefectural city? She had indeed said that to get Qingyuan to help introduce her father, but at most, she thought that her father would go to the county to study. As long as Qingyuan proved that Gu Dajiang's knowledge was not inferior to those elementary scholars, it was not impossible for the county school to make an exception. In any case, when the exam came, he could just take the preparation scholar exam and come back. Unexpectedly, Qingyuan gave a recommendation letter for the prefecture capital. Chapter 560. Going to the prefectural city to study. Qingyuan glanced at her. But you don't want it? Of course, Edo. She had also heard of the Tianhai Academy in the prefecture capital. It had 100 years of history in the Shuanhe Prefecture and was an old academy that had produced many high scholars, honorable scholars, and top scholars. It was said that the current mountain elder had been an official in the capital many years ago. Later, when he was old, he returned to his hometown and became the mountain elder of Tianhai Academy. Qingyuan actually directly gave the mountain elder a recommendation letter. Indeed, it was easy to take advantage of a big tree. Qingyuan was really too useful. Seeing that she had no objections, Qin Wenjing nodded in satisfaction. Aren't you going to the prefectural city to open a shop? You don't have to worry about no one taking care of him. However, before you go, get your father to prepare himself. Mountain Elder Qi is very strict. Gu Yundong smiled. I know. Qin Wenjing gave her a pile of books and asked her to bring them back for Gu Dajiang to read. Gu Yundong thanked Qin Wenjing sincerely, but the other party snorted. Bring me a few more cans later. Our Anning likes it. It was obvious that he liked it, but he still insisted on pushing it to his daughter. This guy was indeed shameless. Gu Yundong responded and went to look for Gu Dajiang. The two of them returned to Yongfu village. After she handed the books to Gu Dajiang and told him Qin Wenzhang's suggestion, Gu Dajiang, who was sitting in the carriage, was slightly stunned. He looked at the books and did not say anything for a long time. Dad. Gu Dajiang placed his trembling fingers on the pile of books. In the past, it was a rare and luxurious thing for him to read so many books. Now that these books were in front of him and he could look through them freely, Gu Dajiang hesitated. Of course, he yearned for it, but Gu Dajiang sighed softly and looked up at Gu Yundong with a smile. Yundong, I know how you feel. It's just that I'm already so old and have long passed the age to study. I won't go to the academy. Gu Yundong frowned. How could he be no longer motivated to study? He was clearly so excited when he saw Qin Wenjing previously and chatted with him happily. Gu Dajiang smiled and said, You used to take care of your mother and Yunshu and Yunka. Now, you even have to make arrangements for your father? You have a lot to take care of at such a young age. Gu Dajiang had been back for 2 to 3 days. He saw the villagers' attitude towards Yundong, visited the shop and workshop, and went to the orchard. Not only did he see the Gu family's huge business, but he also saw Gu Yundong's hard work and responsibilities. However, she was only 15 years old. Her shoulders were so tender, but she worked so hard to support this family. As a father, these were his responsibilities. Whether it was earning money to support his family or educating his children, these were all things he should carry out. In the past, when he was not around, Yundong had no choice but to move forward. Now that he was back, he wanted his daughter to rest and not be so tired. She was not alone anymore. She could rely on him. Perhaps he did not have Yundong's talent in business, but he also wanted to help her share the burden so that she could have more time to rest. Instead of exploiting her and even asking her to spend money to send him to the prefectural city to study, she was already in charge of Yunshu's school fees. Could it be that she had to be in charge of his? It didn't make sense. Alright, they'll return the books to Master Qin another day. It's enough for Yunshu to study in our family. Chapter 561. Finally back, Gu Yundong could tell that he was worried. She did not know whether to laugh or cry. Father, what are you thinking about? She laughed. Don't think that you're adding to my burden. I don't feel tired doing business and opening a shop. This is something I like to do. Opening another shop is an additional sense of achievement for me. I'm enjoying this process. Gu Dajiang was stunned. Enjoy? This was the first time he had heard such a statement. Father, I know that you want to take care of me and share my burden, but I think that no matter who it is, they have their own path to take. I like to do business, so I chose this path. To me, this is not hard and exhausting work, but a career that can bring me energy. And studying is the path father should take. But how was he going to reply? Father, if you want to help me, then go to the academy in the prefecture capital. A person can only unleash his greatest strength in his area of expertise. Think about it. If you get a scholarship and even befriend many like-minded classmates, won't it be more helpful to my future business? Gu Dajiang seemed to be enlightened and suddenly woke up. Yundong had simply provided him with a new idea. Yes, Yundong lacked connections and people with achievements. He was too narrow-minded. Gu Dajiang instantly felt comfortable. He felt as if all his depression had been swept away. He immediately laughed heartily. Yes, Yundong is right. I'm not as far-sighted as you. It wasn't that he was inferior to her, but Gu Dajiang had always placed his family first. This caused him to be limited when making a choice. Fortunately, he was convinced. The carriage drove all the way into Yongfu village. When they reached home, Gu Yundong told them about Gu Dajiang going to the prefectural city to study. At the same time, she said to Aunt Ku, "Aunt, wait a few more days. When the time comes, Father and I will go to the prefectural city. We'll have company together." Aunt Ku glared at her helplessly and did not say anything else. After dinner, Gu Yundong turned around and went to Chen Liang's house. He instructed Chen Jinkai to go to the shop the next day. When she came back, she went to the Zheng family again. 2 days ago, she had promised Dong Xiulan to find a school suitable for Zheng Jia to study in. Now was the time to tell her. Gu Yundong was talking about a private school in the neighboring village. It was Qin Wenjing who had told her. He had met and interacted with the gentleman from the private school and had a good impression of him. Gu Yundong felt that it was very suitable for Zheng Jia. It was not very far, and he didn't have to participate in the imperial examination. Madame Dong trusted Gu Yundong very much and agreed on the spot. She said that she would bring Zheng Jia to take a look another day. After Gu Yundong left, she hurriedly thought about preparing the apprenticeship gift. Zheng Hu felt that the canned food was not bad. Look, the Gu family also took canned food when they visited Master Qin. This thing is not cheap. We work in the Gu family's workshop and can buy it with a discount. It's definitely not wrong to take this. Madame Dong nodded repeatedly. You're right. It's definitely not a problem to follow Yundong. Therefore, the next day, Madame Dong took Zheng Jia to the private school with the canned food. She was very excited when she returned. She had always kept a low profile in the village and did not speak much. Now whenever she met anyone, she had to tell them that her son was going to school. Even when she reached home, the excitement did not subside. Then she saw Shao Qingyuan, who had just walked into the Shao family's courtyard. Madame Dong was stunned. Qingyuan was back? She quickly let Zheng Jia enter the house first and hurried to the Shao family's courtyard. Chapter 562. Yundong and her father are back. The courtyard of the Shao family, which had been quiet for a few days, was bustling with activity. Not only was Shao Qingyuan back, but Mao and the other 3 were also standing in the courtyard, checking on their prey. It seemed like they had gained a lot from this trip. Seeing Madame Dong enter, Shao Qingyuan handed her 2 pheasants. "Auntie, take them back to eat." However, Madame Dong couldn't be bothered to take the 2 pheasants. She quickly said, "Qing, you're finally back. We were so worried for so many days this time. Let me tell you, Yundong is home." Shao Qingyuan's eyes lit up. He stuffed the pheasants into Mao's hand and turned to leave. Unexpectedly, before he could take a step, Madame Dong grabbed him. "Hey, don't be hasty. I haven't finished speaking." Shao Qingyuan frowned. Madame Dong lowered her voice slightly. "Not only is Yundong back, but her father is also back." Shao Qingyuan paused and asked uncertainly, "Her father? You're saying that Uncle Gu has been found? Isn't that so? We've all seen him. I heard from Yundong that she met him at Wanqing Prefecture. His father hasn't given up on looking for them for so long. Now, the family has finally reunited." Madame Dong sighed. "You're the future son-in-law of the Gu family now. This is the first time you'll see your future father-in-law. How can you look like this? You have to leave a good impression on him, right?" Shao Qingyuan had just returned from the deep mountains and was still sweating. Not only were his clothes wet, but they were also tattered. His hair was like a hen's nest. He had definitely not taken a shower in the past few days. Gu Dajiang was a scholar. He would definitely be dissatisfied if Shao Qingyuan appeared in front of him like this. Madame Dong knew that Shao Qingyuan didn't look pretty every time he returned from the mountains, so she quickly came over to remind him. Shao Qingyuan looked down and nodded. "I'll go clean up." He turned around to get a set of clothes and went straight to the bathroom. Madame Dong heaved a sigh of relief and looked at the prey in the courtyard. Although they had been in the mountain for a long time and there was a lot of small prey, she did not see any big guys. However, there seemed to be 2 large boxes of herbs in the corner. Did Qingyuan pick them? Madame Dong was still looking when Mao and the others surrounded her. "Auntie Dong, has Miss Father really been found? Have you seen him? What kind of person is he? Needless to say, just by looking at the girl, you should know that her father is definitely not bad-looking. Who asked about his appearance? I'm asking about his temperament. Do you know his temperament? If our young master wants to see his father-in-law, shouldn't we ask around first? Madame Dong's ears were buzzing as she listened to their conversation. She hurriedly waved her hand and said, I didn't talk much to her father either. How would I know what kind of personality he has? However, her father should be someone who values family and friends. I heard that when he was in Wanqing Prefecture, he would rather not eat or drink in order to save money just to find Yundong and the others. My husband did talk to him. He said that although he's a scholar, he doesn't look down on us bumpkins. He's a person who's easy to get along with and doesn't put on any airs. When Ah Mao and the other three heard this, they immediately smiled. Then I'm relieved. Uncle Gu will definitely be satisfied with our young master's character. That's right. Our young master is responsible, loyal, and earns lots of money. Most importantly, he listens to Mississippi. There's nothing to be picky about. If he misses this son-in-law, how can he find a better one? Chapter 563. Rejected. Madame Dong was originally a little nervous, but after hearing their words, she felt that it made sense and immediately became confident. Qingyuan was a good person. Why would a woman marry? Wasn't it just because she wanted her man to treat her well? Qingyuan had nothing to say to Yundong. He heard that when Yundong wanted to open a workshop, Qingyuan gave out all his savings without a word and did not leave a single cent for himself. Yundong's blueprint was taken away by the young master of the Peng family. Qingyuan chased after him without thinking. Yundong's mother was sick and still lacked an herb. These days, Qingyuan went into the mountains to look for it every few days. When Yundong wasn't around, it wasn't that no one came to cause trouble for the workshop. They just wanted to make a scene while Yundong wasn't around. It was all settled by Qingyuan. Madame Dong felt that no man in the entire Fengkai County would treat a woman so well, let alone Yongfu village. Even when her mother-in-law was still around when they first got married, the mother-in-law controlled the family's money and secretly hid it from her. She was furious. Therefore, Gu Dajiang would definitely be satisfied with Shao Qingyuan. At this moment, Zheng who was not around. Otherwise, he would definitely stand in the shoes of an old father and tell her, **T. While they were talking, Shao Qingyuan had finally tidied up. When he came out, he was refreshed and looked especially young and energetic. Madame Dong nodded. Yes, not bad. He even put on new clothes. Shao Qingyuan went back to his room to get the wine. Liu Wei had left it here. He said that it was ridiculous that he didn't even have wine in his house as a man. Then he brought 2 jars of wine over the next day. Shao Qingyuan had never drunk it before. He didn't like it, but it was just right to send it to his future father-in-law. In addition to the wine, he also carried the wild chickens and rabbits. It was a pity that there were no good books, calligraphy, or paintings at home. If he wanted to suit his father-in-law, that would be the most suitable. Madame Dong, on the other hand, felt that there was no problem. There was wine and meat. It was already very good in the countryside. However, before Shao Qingyuan left the courtyard, he suddenly stopped. As if he had thought of something, he quickly returned to his room. When he came out again, he was holding a wooden box in his arms. Others didn't know what was inside, but it looked quite expensive. Only then did Shao Qingyuan slowly exhale and walk towards the Gu residence. At the Gu family's entrance, Gu Dajiang stood there with a cold expression. When Shao Qingyuan returned, many people in the village saw them carrying a lot of prey. Gu Dajiang had originally planned to stroll around the fruit forest, but when he heard the news on the way, he returned without a word. Who knew that even after waiting for half a day, Shao Qingyuan didn't come to visit? Alright, this guy wanted to marry his daughter with this attitude? No way. From afar, Shao Qingyuan saw Gu Dajiang looking at him coldly. Uncle Gu. Shao Qingyuan recognized him at a glance. He secretly heaved a sigh of relief and suppressed the nervousness that suddenly surged up. He walked up to him and said, Shao Qingyin, Yundongs. Before he could finish speaking, Gu Dajiang interrupted him. Oh, Shao Qingyuan, right? I understand. You can leave now. Shao Qingyuan frowned. Uncle Gu Dajiang turned around and walked straight into the Gu residence. Chapter 564. Meeting Fiance again. When Shao Qingyuan wanted to follow him in, the door was suddenly closed and there was no more movement. He pursed his lips and sighed inwardly. True enough. He did not say anything and did not knock on the door. He just stood outside the door and faced the Gu family's house. Madame Dong, Mao, and the others were all shocked. They stood at the corner and looked at each other, talking softly. What's going on? Didn't they say that Uncle Gu is easy to talk to? Why did you close the door directly? He doesn't even have time to understand our young master's character. That's right. I think you might not know that our young master has been rejected. Don't all actors sing like this? As fathers, they look down on poor boys, so they deliberately don't let the two of them meet and take the opportunity to break them up. But our young master isn't poor, right? Compared to young Master Liu in the county, he's poor. Could it be that Uncle Gu wants to matchmake Miss with the young master of the Liu family? Everyone turned their heads and looked at Shu, who was the last to speak. In the end, Mao said, let's go and bring young master back first. Then we can sit down and discuss how to enter the Gu family. As he spoke, he was about to walk towards Shao Qingyuan. Unfortunately, Madame Dong pulled him back. What are you going to do? She glared at them. Can't you tell? That's a test for our future father-in-law, understand? There are also families in our village who dote on their daughters. They will deliberately make things difficult for their son-in-law when he comes for the first time. Is that so? Madame Dong nodded affirmatively. That's right. When the sixth grandfather in our village married his daughter, he asked the groom to help him with half a day's work. Yundong's father is a refined man, so he won't torture Qingyuan like this. I reckon he'll just stand outside for a while to test his patience. How long will that take? Madame Dong was not sure about this. It shouldn't be long. As she spoke, she raised her head and looked at the scorching sun above her, feeling a little worried. The sun was so bright and the weather was so hot. She hoped that he would not get a heatstroke later. No, she had to go back and prepare some honeysuckle. Seeing that she had left, Mao and the other three looked at each other with even more worry in their eyes. At the same time, in the Gu family's courtyard, Gu Yundong also looked helplessly at her father's back as he returned to his room. She wanted to say something, but Auntie pulled her back. Don't add fuel to the fire. Let me tell you, if you speak up for Shao Qingyuan, he will have to stand outside for another 2 hours. Do you believe me? Of course, Gu Yundong believed her. But in this weather, he just came back from the mountains. He won't be able to take it later. Auntie glanced at her. Even if he can't take it, he has to deal with it. If he wants to marry someone else's daughter, it won't make sense if he doesn't suffer a little. Besides, someone like Shao Qingyuan will be fine standing under the sun for the entire day. Don't worry. In the past, Auntie could not interfere too much in Gu Yundong's private matters because of her status. Otherwise, she would have wanted to make things difficult for Shao Qingyuan. The main reason was that Gu Yundong was too disappointing. She had given herself away so easily. Now that Gu Dajiang was back as a father, he had to let Shao Qingyuan know that the Gu family's daughter was a treasure. She couldn't be casually married. The harder it was to obtain, the more one knew how to cherish it. Gu Yundong could only sit back down. She could not go out to take a look either. On the other hand, Gu Yunshu, who was resting at home, stole a glance outside. Then, he hurriedly ran to Gu Dajiang's room and asked him, Father, are you making things difficult for my brother Shao because of eldest sister's previous fiancé? Chapter 565. What happened? Gu Dajiang? Gu Yundong, who had just walked over? Fiancé? All right, the last time Shao Qingyuan followed her to the Yongning Prefecture, he had asked her about this and said that Yunshu had told him. At that time, Gu Yundong thought that it was just Yunshu's joke and did not take it seriously. When she got home, she was so busy that she forgot. She really did not expect to hear the word fiancé from Yunshu again. Gu Dajiang was equally dumbfounded. He felt terrible. Shao Qingyuan had yet to be dealt with, and now there was an inexplicable fiancé? He pulled Gu Yunshu in front of him. Tell me in detail. What do you mean by eldest sister's ex-fiancé? Did your eldest sister have a fiancé in the past? Gu Yunshu blinked and looked innocent. No, but I heard it with my own ears. Did I remember wrongly? He began to doubt himself. Gu Dajiang said, When did you hear it? Where did you hear it? Who did you hear it from? Come, tell me everything. Last year, when we were in Gu village, didn't Grandpa and Grandma tell Dad that they engaged eldest sister to someone? They even said that the person was from town and gave them the money. Gu Dajiang frowned. Then, his expression turned especially ugly. Engaged? That was all old Gu and Madame Zhao's wishful thinking. Moreover, he wasn't her fiancé. They were obviously trying to sell Yundong out. The family in town had arranged a marriage for an old man in his 50s. He was old enough to be Yundong's grandfather, yet he still dared to marry a 14-year-old girl. Gu Dajiang knew that old Gu and the others wouldn't find a good husband for Yundong, but he didn't expect them to want to sell Yundong for 5 taels of silver. What fiancé? He spat. Gu Dajiang rejected it on the spot. He threatened that if old Gu dared to do such a thing again, he would rather die together with everyone than let his daughter jump into the fire pit. Old Gu was furious at that time. He even said that it was for his own good. He took back the 5 taels of silver to treat Madame Yang. Gu Dajiang didn't listen at all. He even went to town to beat up that old thing who coveted his daughter. At that time, this matter had not spread out in the Gu family, but he did not expect Gu Yunshu to hear about it. The problem was that this person was only half listening. Gu Dajiang rubbed his forehead. No, your sister didn't have a fiancé in the past. That was your grandparents acting on their own. It doesn't count. Yunshu, don't mention this again in the future. Otherwise, if others hear about it, it won't be good for your sister, understand? Oh. Gu Yundong nodded. I only told Brother Shao once. I won't say it again. Then, he thought for a moment and asked the previous question, then why did Father make things difficult for my brother Shao? Are you going to break them up? But my brother Shao is such a good person. Gu Yunka ran in and nodded. Yes, elder brother Shao is great. Gu Dajiang felt terrible. It was fine if it was the eldest daughter, but why was his son and youngest daughter subdued by him? However, Madame Yang seemed to understand and nodded. He's great. Gu Dajiang felt that his family had lost. He needed to hold on to the last line. Gu Yundong did not dare to speak anymore. Indeed, the more she praised Shao Qingyuan, the angrier her father became. Chapter 566. Note, however, seeing that the weather was getting hotter, Gu Yundong began to feel uneasy. Aunt Ke pulled her over. It's fine, it's fine. I just went to take a look. He just sweated a little too much, but he's still very energetic. Gu Yundong nodded randomly. No one knew if she was listening. However, at this moment, Madame Cui came over to let them have lunch. This meant that Shao Qingyuan had been standing outside for 2 hours. It would only get hotter when it was noon. She followed Gu Dajiang to the dining hall, but she couldn't eat much. She only ate some porridge. Gu Dajiang looked up at her and sighed inwardly. This silly girl. She was clearly so steady when doing business. Why was she unable to hold it in now? He shook his head and pretended not to see it. He turned around and picked up a pork rib for Madame Yang to eat. Gu Yundong was speechless. You're torturing my man while showing off your love in front of me. Can we still be father and daughter? I'm angry. I'm not eating anymore. Gu Yundong put down her chopsticks and ran towards the door. Other than the main door in the middle, there was a small door at the side of the Gu family's courtyard. Gu Yundong opened the small door and secretly glanced at Shao Qingyuan. Perhaps sensing her gaze, Shao Qingyuan quickly looked over. When their eyes met, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Then, he moved his lips silently, as if he was saying something. Gu Yundong could vaguely tell that he said that he was fine and asked her to go back quickly. It was just standing for a few hours. It was not a problem for him. Gu Yundong immediately felt very uncomfortable, especially when she saw his lips that were cracked by the sun. Her heart ached constantly. At this moment, there were many people passing by the door. They were mostly working in the Gu family's workshop. The weather was hot now, and the days were long and the nights were short. The working time in the workshop had also been adjusted. At noon, everyone could go back and rest for 2 hours. Therefore, other than those on duty, many people went home to eat after getting food in the workshop. They also rested before coming back to work in the afternoon. Therefore, when these people passed by the Gu family's door, they saw Shao Qingyuan standing there stiffly. Seeing his pursed lips and expressionless face, no one dared to step forward and speak. They only began to discuss softly. Shao Qingyuan pretended not to hear them and stood there like a soldier. In the end, Gu Yundong did not persuade him to leave. Although her heart ached, she knew Gu Dajiang's intentions. If she slapped her father in the face at this time, if Shao Qingyuan dared to bully her in the future, her father would not even have the right to speak up for her. She understood the ways of the world. It was just uncomfortable. Gu Yundong returned to the courtyard listlessly. Aunt Ku, who was sewing, glanced at her. Another 2 hours passed. Gu Yundong could not help but look at Gu Dajiang's room. Gu Dajiang had woken up from his afternoon nap, and the workers from the Gu family workshop had returned. Seeing that Shao Qingyuan was still standing there motionless, the discussion became even louder. Fortunately, a cool breeze soon blew over. Before Gu Yundong could heave a sigh of relief, she heard the unique thunder of summer. Before long, bean-sized raindrops poured down. Accompanied by a rumbling sound, the heat of the entire day was swept away. Gu Yundong frowned. Even Aunt Ku stopped what she was doing. At this moment, Father Tong hurriedly walked through the corridor to Gu Yundong and handed her a small piece of paper. Chapter 567. Shao Qingyuan enters the Gu family. Gu Yundong was stunned. Who sent it? Father Tong pointed in the direction of the Shao family. Mao climbed the ladder and stood on the wall just now. He threw it down in the rain. The note wrapped a stone and was kept in a pouch, so it was thrown under the roof without being drenched by the rain. Gu Yundong frowned and unfolded the note. After reading the words on it, her expression suddenly changed and she stood up. What's wrong? What does it say? Enka asked. Gu Yundong did not have time to answer her. She hurriedly entered Gu Dajiang's house. Gu Dajiang snorted and heard Gu Yundong say, Father, let Brother Shao in. Mao just sent me a piece of paper saying that they encountered a wolf when they entered the mountain. Brother Shao was seriously injured in order to save him. Gu Dajiang couldn't maintain the expression on his face. His eyes changed as he suddenly stood up and walked out. As he walked, he said to Shui Rong, run over first and bring him in. Also, get Tong in to send for a doctor. After Shui Rong ran out, he could not help but scold. He's just trying to be brave. Gu Yundong quickened his pace. When he reached the entrance of the Gu residence, he happened to see Shui Rong helping Shao Qingyuan in. His clothes were stained with blood. She was angry and anxious. Why didn't you say anything when you were injured? Do you want to die? As she spoke, she went to help him up. Seeing his pale face and weak breathing, she wished she could hit him again. The entire Gu family moved. Madame Cui went to tidy up the room. Her daughter-in-law, Madame Jiang, went to boil water. Tong Shuitao went to the Shao family to get the medicine. She knew that he had it at home. Aunt Ku and Shinsidian had prepared a first aid kit, gauze, and so on. When Shao Qingyuan was placed on the bed, his body was hot, as if he had a high fever. When Gu Yundong placed her hand on his forehead, it was so hot that she almost retracted her hand. She hurriedly asked, Do you have medicine to reduce your fever at home? No, I didn't have time to make it. During this period of time, he had been thinking about other pills. There were all kinds of medicine that could treat internal and external injuries. On the other hand, he didn't have time to think about common medicine like fever. Gu Yundong frowned. She turned around and saw Mao and the rest coming in. They had brought a lot of herbs, but this medicine needed to be brewed slowly. It was too slow. Gu Yundong thought about it and could not help but take out a fever pill when no one was paying attention. She stuffed it into Shao Qingyuan's mouth and said in a low voice, Eat this. Chapter 568. Blocking Gu Dajiang, but Gu Yundong had been paying attention to the door and did not receive his gaze. The doctor was quickly brought back. He was from the village, so it was not difficult for him to treat external injuries. Actually, as long as Shao Qingyuan woke up, he could handle it himself. The doctor prescribed medicine for Shao Qingyuan and wrapped the wound before walking out. Gu Yundong hurried forward and asked, "How is he?" "As long as the fever subsides, it'll be fine. It's best not to touch the wound on your back. Avoid touching water. You'll be fine after recuperating for a while." Gu Yundong got someone to send him out and walked into the house in a few steps. Shao Qingyuan was half asleep. When he saw her come in, he even smiled at her. Gu Yundong glared at him angrily. "You deserve it. Who told you not to say anything?" Shao Qingyuan didn't seem to hear her and just looked at her. They had not seen each other for a long time. Initially, he wanted to stand in front of her in clean clothes. He did not expect to be in such a sorry state, which made him feel very regretful. Gu Yundong's heart softened. She walked to the edge of the bed and lowered his voice. "They'll stay here and watch over you. Hurry up and sleep. Amao told me just now that you didn't sleep well in the mountains. Thankfully you lasted until now." "Yes." Shao Qingyuan's throat was dry, and his voice was hoarse. My father was also very nervous when he heard that you were injured. He didn't mean to blame you." Only then did Shao Qingyuan feel relieved. He closed his eyes slightly and fell asleep. Gu Dajiang, who was outside the door, wanted Gu Yundong to come out a few times, but he could not speak. He didn't feel that he had done anything wrong. With his observation of Shao Qingyuan and the information he had heard from Yundong, it wouldn't be a problem for him to stand at the door for a day and a night. This person was strong. It was not a problem for him to stand at the door and bask in the sun. However, the outcome was indeed terrible. Gu Dajiang began to feel frustrated. He couldn't stay at home anymore. He turned around and said to Madame Yang, "I'm going out for a walk." Madame Yang nodded and began to look at Shao Qingyuan's room worriedly. Gu Dajiang was speechless. It was simply too vexing. With his hands behind his back, he left the Gu residence alone. When Gu Yunshu turned around, she happened to see his back. She suddenly felt as if his father was very lonely. At this moment, the rain had already stopped. After the summer afternoon was washed by the rain, it was much cooler. Gu Dajiang walked along the village road and saw many people going out after the rain. They gathered together and chatted. Chapter 569. Someone with malicious intentions. Gu Dajiang subconsciously frowned. "I am." The man looked around in a mysterious manner. "Can we talk in private?" It was as if something important had happened. Gu Dajiang sized up the person, who looked to be about the same age as him. He was wearing the clothes of an ordinary villager and was shorter than him. His eyes were slightly evasive. Gu Dajiang sneered in his heart and said directly, "No." The other party was stunned for a moment, as if he did not expect him to reject so bluntly. However, when he looked up and saw the anger and dissatisfaction on his face, he seemed to understand and said, "Brother Gu seems to be very angry." "Who's your brother?" the man said again. "Is it because of Shao Qingyuan? I heard that Brother Gu doesn't like Shao Qingyuan." "That makes sense. After all, he's a wolf cub that everyone in the village fears. He's fierce and cruel. No one should like him." "A wolf cub?" Gu Dajiang narrowed his eyes and muttered softly. Seeing that he was interested, the other party immediately said, "Brother Gu, you still don't know? This Shao Qingyuan was picked up by the Li family's old master from a wild wolf in the mountains when he was young. In the past, he even drank the milk of a female wolf, so he has the ferocity of a wolf in his bones. When he was young, it was quite obvious that other children didn't play with him because he was a biter. Once, he bit a child's arm until it bled. That child's parents came to seek justice. It was only when the Li family's old master apologized to the parents that it was over. Tell me, didn't old Master Li treat him well? Old Master Li brought him out of the deep mountains and raised him. He caused trouble and old Master Li helped to clean up the mess. He was infamous. Later on, for him, old Master Li cut ties with the Li family and moved out with him. Old Master Li took good care of him. He couldn't even compare to Old Master Li's biological son and grandson. Unexpectedly, when Old Master Li was seriously ill, not only did Shao Qingyuan ignore him, but after he died, he even sent Old Master Li's corpse back to the Li family. He left without looking back. When he returned, he ate meat and drank wine. Don't you think that's unfilial? Everyone in the village says that he's an ingrate and can't be trusted, so he got the title of a wolf cub. That's not all. He was unfilial to the old man and also attacked the children. As for the Gao family at the entrance of the village, he once threw their children into the river. When they almost died, he fished them out and threw them back down. He scared the children out of their wits. Do you think this method is cruel? Because he's so unscrupulous, everyone in the village is afraid of him. Chapter 570. He has no right to disdain. That person was slightly stunned. Just as he was about to smile, he froze. He quickly denied it. No, I didn't mean that. Then what do you mean? What I want to say is that Miss Gu is innocent and ignorant of the world. It's because Shao Qingyuan is too cunning. He schemed and racked his brains to use many methods. Miss Gu did not see his true colors and fell into his trap. Of course, I believe that Brother Gu can definitely see through Shao Qingyuan's nature at a glance. Otherwise, you wouldn't have rejected him. Although he said that the other party's gaze was disdainful, what did he mean by seeing through Shao Qingyuan's nature? He simply looked down on the bumpkins in this village. When he heard that young Master Lu had come that day, Gu Dajiang respectfully invited him in. He pulled young Master Lu and chatted for more than 2 hours. In the end, young Master Lu was frightened away by his enthusiasm. In short, Shao Qingyuan is too despicable. He actually deceived Miss Gu. Gu Dajiang stared at that person and said coldly, "So you mean that everyone in the village can tell that Shao Qingyuan has a bad character?" The other party was stunned. He felt that something was wrong, but he still nodded. Yes. Gu Dajiang suddenly raised his voice. Everyone in the village can tell, but my daughter, who has a workshop and a shop while managing so many people, can't tell. She was even fooled. Are you saying that our Yundong is stupid? No. I didn't mean that. Wasn't Gu Dajiang's focus wrong? He was clearly talking about Shao Qingyuan. Why did this guy have to involve his daughter? That's what you mean. You still want to deny it. I was wondering why you came to me and said something. It turns out that you're scolding me indirectly. You actually dare to provoke me in front of me. The other party was speechless. No, how did you understand this as provocation? Seeing Gu Dajiang approach him menacingly, the other party finally couldn't take it anymore. He suddenly turned his head. Is there something wrong with you? With that, he quickly ran away. Gu Dajiang was abnormal. No wonder his daughter liked Shao Qingyuan. Had the father and daughter both gone crazy? Could it be that after living with Madame Yang for too long, her family's brains had gone bad? Gu Dajiang stood on the spot and watched as he ran away. After a while, he snorted coldly. How dare you sow discord in front of me? Who do you think you are? No matter how bad Shao Qingyuan was, he was still his daughter's man. Gu Dajiang could despise him, his wife could despise him, and his daughter could despise him. However, what right did such an unrelated person have to say anything? Our Yundong has good taste. However, when he saw his master sitting there motionless, he could not help but persuade him, "Actually, master, why don't you think in another direction? Young Master Shao has no parents. If Miss marries him, she can be the head of the family and don't have to serve her in-laws. Moreover, young Master Shao's family is in Yongfu village. His house is next door. It's only 2 steps away. Usually, he can come to the Gu family directly for food or anything. We can know if Miss has suffered or not even if she doesn't go out. This way, it's better than marrying into a rich family." Of course, Gu Dajiang knew these principles. It was because he knew that he didn't object strongly. Exhaling, Gu Dajiang closed the wooden box on the table and stood up to walk out. "I'll go and see if he's awake." He went straight to Shao Qingyuan's room. Just as he reached the door, he heard his son's voice. Chapter 572. Yunshu worries about his wife. Eldest sister, are you angry with father? Yunshu said uneasily. Father came back just now. I saw him enter the house alone. He's so pitiful. He instantly felt that he had a huge responsibility. His father and eldest sister had a feud. As the eldest son in the family, he had the obligation to enlighten them so that the family could be harmonious and happy. Yes, Yunshu work hard. Yundong was sitting in front of Shao Qingyuan's bed. When she saw that his fever had subsided, she heaved a sigh of relief. She did not expect to hear her brother's worried words. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What are you thinking? Your head isn't big, but you're thinking too much. Why is eldest sister angry with father? Father didn't deliberately let brother Shao expose himself to the son knowing that he was injured. This is an accident. Yunshu nodded, not fully understanding. Is that so? Yes, you'll know when you become a father. Then I'll get engaged and married as soon as possible. That way, I can become a father sooner. Yundong was speechless. No, that was not what she meant. Dajiang couldn't stand it anymore. He frowned and entered. What nonsense are you talking about? You're still so young and you're already thinking about getting a wife. This daughter had just gotten engaged, and his son was actually thinking of starting a family? Yunshu was unconvinced. Father, I have a classmate who is only a year older than me. He is already engaged. He has a wife as soon as he is born. Why can't I be engaged at my age? If father had chosen a wife for me when I was born, I wouldn't have to worry so much now. Yundong turned her head. She wanted to laugh, but she had to hold it in. She stood up and called out, Father? Dajiang nodded and decided not to talk to his annoying son. He handed over the box in his hand. Shao Qingyuan gave this to you. Keep it well and don't return it to him. Yundong raised her eyebrows in surprise. She opened the box and took a look. Then she laughed. This was the second time she had received such a box. Every time, Shao Qingyuan would put all his money into it. Was this person really counting on her to give him some living expenses? She couldn't help but turn her head and look at the man lying on the bed. Unexpectedly, she met his dark eyes. Dajiang also realized that he was awake. He asked stiffly, Are you feeling better? Shao Qingyuan moved slightly and wanted to sit up. However, Dajiang rushed forward and reached out to stop him. He frowned and said, Lie down. Don't move around. Otherwise, the wound will open. Shao Qingyuan could only lie down again. He looked at Dajiang and said, Uncle Gu, I'm sorry. Chapter 573. His hatred. The few people in the room looked up at him at the same time. Dajiang said, That person told me something about you. Shao Qingyuan was stunned. As if he had thought of something, his expression changed slightly and he asked in a hoarse voice, What did he say? He said that you were an ingrate and had once been adopted by the Li family. The Li family's old master treated you too well. He even fell out with his biological children for you and moved out to live with you. In the end, when he was seriously ill, you didn't care about him and even transported his corpse back to the Li family. After Dajiang finished speaking, he saw Shao Qingyuan suddenly clench his fingers. The veins on the back of his hand bulged, and his lips were tightly pursed. The coldness in his eyes almost materialized. How much hatred did he have for the Li family? Shao Qingyuan asked word by word, What else did he say? He said that your methods are cruel and that you're cold and heartless. You'll pass it on to the children in the future. Before Dajiang could finish speaking, Shao Qingyuan had already sat up. He pulled off the blanket covering him and was about to get off the ground. Yundong was faster and stopped him. What are you doing? You can't go anywhere now. Rest well. Shao Qingyuan's movements affected his wound, and the pain from his body woke him up a little. Coupled with the fact that his fever had just subsided and his entire body was sore, he sat back on the bed with Yundong's help. However, as if he had thought of something, he suddenly looked up and grabbed Gu Yundong's hand tightly. No, that man wasn't telling the truth. I know. I've known you for a long time and understand you better than anyone else. I believe you. Gu Yundong felt his hand tremble slightly and her heart tightened. She held his hand firmly. Shao Qingyuan heaved a sigh of relief, but he quickly looked up at Gu Dajiang. Without waiting for Gu Dajiang to speak, Gu Yundong spoke first. Don't worry, my father won't believe it either. That person clearly has ill intentions and doesn't want us to have an easy time. Right, father? Gu Dajiang nodded. I'm not that biased. I know that person is here to sow discord. However, to his surprise, Shao Qingyuan's reaction was so big. However, he paused for a moment and continued, since you're going to marry Yundong in the future, it's better to make some things clear. Supposedly, when two people get married, they have to understand each other's families. You possibly know everything about the Gu family, but Yundong doesn't even know why you're called a wolf cub, right? New Jersey 11 Gu Dajiang waved his hand. There's no need to be in a hurry to say it now. You're still injured. Think carefully. It's not too late to say later. With that, he left with a worried Gu Yunshu. Only when the two of them had completely disappeared did Shao Qingyuan retract his gaze and look at Gu Yundong. The two of them were still holding hands. Gu Yundong wanted to see if the wound on his back had split open. She pulled her hand out twice but did not succeed. In the end, she said helplessly, "Can I get Tong Ping to come in and help you take a look?" Shao Qingyuan still didn't move. He stared at her quietly for a long time before asking softly, "Aren't you going to ask?" Gu Yundong sat down and thought about it in silence. After a while, she said, "I did want to ask you, but you seem to be against mentioning this matter. I just know that perhaps this matter is very painful and heavy for you. I don't know what the Li family has done to you. I only know that I want you to slowly forget those bad things. One day, when you can talk about these things calmly, I will know." Shao Qingyuan's eyes gradually became fiery as he looked at her. His breathing also became slightly hurried. The way he looked at Gu Yundong was so hot that it seemed to be able to burn everything. Chapter 574. Shao Qingyuan's background. Gu Yundong looked at him and could not help but pinch his hand. Don't think too much. What you need now is to recuperate. Nothing else is important. Also, it's all right with my father. Other than overly loving his daughter, he's actually very reasonable. She went out to call Tong Ping. Tong Ping came in and changed his dressing. Sure enough, the wound had opened up a little. Fortunately, it was not very serious. Gu Yundong fed him medicine. Seeing that he had closed his eyes and fallen asleep again, she quietly left the room. However, as soon as she left, Shao Qingyuan opened his eyes and looked at the beam above his head. No one knew what he was thinking. The Gu family's house was very peaceful this night. Gu Yundong knew that her father had accepted Shao Qingyuan. She felt relieved and slept peacefully. However, she did care about Shao Qingyuan's injuries, so when she woke up early in the morning, she quickly ran to his room. Shao Qingyuan had already sat up. Tong Ping had come over to change his dressing at dawn. He had just finished his porridge. Gu Yundong stepped forward and placed a hand on his forehead. Good, he did not have a recurring fever, and he was in much better spirits than yesterday. His recovery ability was indeed very powerful. From the moment she entered, Shao Qingyuan's gaze had been on her. His eyes were so gentle that they were almost watery. Gu Yundong slowly felt uncomfortable under his gaze and could not help but glare at him. "If you keep staring at me when my father comes later, you'll be chased home. Do you believe me? Yundong doesn't want me to go back?" Shao Qingyuan said and reached out to hold her hand. His hand was warm and the weather was still a little cool early in the morning. Gu Yundong's small hand was cold. When he held it, he instantly felt a burning heat surge to his heart. Gu Yundong was speechless. Shao Qingyuan was extremely satisfied. After holding her hand long enough, he finally let go of her. "Go and call Uncle Gu. There are some things that shouldn't be hidden anymore." Gu Yundong was stunned. "You?" Shao Qingyuan took a deep breath. "I'm very calm now. With you around, Those things can't hurt me anymore. After a pause, he opened his mouth again and asked nervously, "Is it true that no matter what I say, you won't leave me?" Yundong did not know what kind of battle he had gone through that night. She only knew that at this moment, Qingyuan had an unprecedented vulnerability and urgently needed her affirmation. Hence, she took his hand again and interlocked her fingers with his. She nodded and said, "As long as you haven't done anything to let me down, I won't leave you even if you're a monster." Chapter 575. He has grandpa. When Qingyuan was brought back to the Li family, he was not even a year old and did not know how to walk. How was he brought home? He was too young at that time and had no impression of it. From the moment he could remember, it was his life in the Li family after he was 3 or 4 years old. Old Master Li brought him back. The Li family's eldest son only had 2 daughters at that time, so Old Master Li put Qingyuan under their name. However, the Li family's eldest son and his wife did not like this child who had suddenly appeared. It was as if they could no longer give birth to a son, making the entire village laugh. Moreover, Mrs. Li, or Madame Bao, was already pregnant at that time. She felt that this was definitely a son. Unexpectedly, it was another daughter. It was Li Chuanxiang, who had come to the Gu family's workshop to look for a job. She was only a year younger than Qingyuan. When Madame Bao heard that it was a daughter again, there was no telling if it was because she was afraid of being criticized or something, but she pushed all the blame to Qingyuan and said that he was a jinx. He was the one who caused her to lose her son. Qingyuan's life in the Li family had become exceptionally difficult. Even though he was still young at that time, he often starved and froze. He was 2 or 3 years old, but he was still so skinny that he could not even walk steadily. At that time, Qingyuan could already vaguely remember things and understood that he was not a child of the Li family. Although he was a little disappointed, he still felt that it was already very lucky for him to have a place to stay. Besides, he had his grandfather. When he was beaten, Grandpa would take the ointment and comfort him while applying it. After he was scolded, Grandpa would also scold and blame his foster parents. When he was hungry, Grandpa would secretly feed him half of the sweet potatoes he had kept. If he was cold, Grandpa would modify his old clothes for him to wear. Therefore, it didn't matter. Compared to many homeless children, Qingyuan felt very happy. He was very satisfied. He worked especially hard. His small figure often carried a wooden bucket that was taller than him to feed the pigs. He carried a huge basket to hunt for piggrass. When he returned home, he would always have injuries all over his body due to the bumps. When faced with his grandfather's pained gaze, he would always comfort him sensibly. "It's not hard on me." However, when little Qingyuan was 5 years old, Madame Bao was pregnant again. She already had 3 daughters in the past. This time, she had to get a boy in one fell swoop. She was so excited that she could not care less about finding trouble with little Qingyuan, even though her 3 daughters would occasionally order this adopted son around. However, a few days before she was about to give birth, Madame Bao suddenly had a nightmare. In her dream, someone told her that there was a jinx blocking her way at home. He was selfish and domineering and did not allow other boys to share her love. Therefore, it would be difficult for Madame Bao to give birth to a son. When Madame Bao woke up, her face was pale. She immediately thought of little Qingyuan and immediately shook her husband awake. The 2 of them hated Qingyuan to death. The next morning, Father Li quietly knocked him out and carried him into the mountains. "Go back to where you came from. This is your own life." He directly left him at the 9 Tigers Mountain. When little Qingyuan woke up, he was faced with a black monkey covered in fur. It stared at him with its round eyes. He was terrified and turned to run. However, he was young and in the mountains. He only ran a few steps before he slid down the hill. However, before he could care about the pain, he was carried away by the monkey that was even taller than him. Chapter 577. leaving the Li family Madame Bao in fatherly disgust. The two of them were even more ruthless this time. They got the news from somewhere and contacted a gangster in the county. It was said that a group of human traffickers had been wandering around the city during that period of time and had specially targeted those good-looking little boys. Little Qingyuan was good-looking. At that time, even though he was sallow and thin, his facial features were still very outstanding. This was also the reason why the children of Madame Bao hated him. Madame Bao and the gangster had agreed that she would not take a single cent as long as the gangster took Shao Qingyuan far away, so that he would never appear in front of them again. Qingyuan was indeed taken away. This time, he knew what was going on. He could clearly feel the malice of his adoptive parents, who wanted him dead. Actually, he had no feelings for them. He just couldn't bear to part with his grandfather. If his grandfather knew that something had happened to him, he wouldn't know how sad his grandfather would be. Moreover, these human traffickers were ruthless. He had eavesdropped on what they wanted to do by abducting these children. When one of the kids wanted to escape, his leg was even broken. Little Qingyuan knew that he had to escape. Coincidentally, there was a child who was captured with them. The two of them seemed to know what the other party meant from each other's eyes. While no one was paying attention, the two of them talked and set fire when the human traffickers let down their guard. At that time, they had actually already been brought to Qingyuan Prefecture. To little Qingyuan, who was going on a long trip for the first time, it was already 1,000,000 miles away from Yongfu village. Therefore, after escaping, he was brought to the government office. When the officials said that they wanted to send him back and asked for his home address, little Qingyuan hesitated for a long time. He thought that since his adoptive parents did not want him, he might as well not go back. He was already 8 years old and could support himself. But what about Grandpa? Knowing that he was missing, Grandpa must be very anxious. He might be looking for him everywhere. Little Qingyuan thought about it and decided to go back first. He would let his grandfather know that he was fine. Then he would talk to his grandfather and leave the Li family. When he returned to the Li family, he saw old Master Li, who had broken his leg looking for him. Qingyuan immediately blamed himself. Especially when he thought about how he had considered whether he should come back or not. He felt that he was too unfilial. Grandpa Li was very happy to see him and kept comforting him. Grandpa is fine. As long as you're safe and sound, it doesn't matter even if both of my legs are broken. The Li family's parents' faces were very ugly. Moreover, because Madame Bao had given birth to another son, they firmly believed in the idea of little Qingyuan jinxing their family. In the end, little Qingyuan did not leave. He had to take care of his grandfather. Grandpa didn't agree to let him go either. He even begged him not to say anything about being trafficked. Otherwise, if what his adoptive parents had done was exposed, the Li family would be destroyed. Not only did the Li family have the first branch, but they also had the second branch, Grandpa and other innocent people. Grandpa was about to kneel down in front of him. How could little Qingyuan not agree? However, ever since then, little Qingyuan had been guarding against the Li family's parents. Fortunately, he had grown up and slowly understood many things. When he was 13 years old, Madame Bao was pregnant again. Shao Qingyuan knew that the Li family's parents would not let him off this time. He left the Li family without hesitation. Seeing that his attitude was firm, his grandfather finally stopped persuading him and even left home with him. The grandfather and grandson lived together. This action embarrassed the Li family and made them the laughingstock of the entire village. Just as he was considering whether to ease his relationship with the Li family's parents and move back to the Li family so that his grandfather could feel better, he realized that his grandfather's condition had suddenly worsened and the man's mind was starting to blur. Occasionally, he would even curse himself to the point where he could not even hold the medicine bowl. Shao Qingyuan was very anxious and went to the county city to invite a doctor over. The doctor said that he was poisoned. As for what poison it was, he could not find out. He was afraid that he would have to go to the Prefectural city to get a doctor. He could not treat it. Shao Qingyuan was very afraid that his grandfather would die just like that. He had just had the ability to let his grandfather live a good life. How could he accept him leaving? He planned to bring his grandfather to the prefectural city the next day and find the best doctor. He had to treat his grandfather's illness. Shao Qingyuan had even prepared a carriage, but when he went to cover his grandfather with a blanket that night, he heard something that stunned him. Shao Qingyuan, why weren't you the one poisoned? It should have been you. Why didn't you drink that cup of tea? Shao Qingyuan was stunned. He accidentally knocked over a bowl beside him. Grandpa Li was woken up. He didn't know if he was still dreaming or if his reaction was slow after being poisoned, but when he heard Shao Qingyuan's unbelievable question, he blurted out some words. Chapter 579. Cruel truth. Shao Qingyuan would never forget how his grandfather had looked at him with a ferocious and vicious smile back then. His face had been twisted. Yes, I administered the poison. But I was going to give it to you. Why didn't you drink it? Shao Qingyuan thought about it and remembered that his grandfather had indeed poured him a glass of water that day, saying that he had worked hard and that his grandfather could not help. Being sick, at most, his grandfather could only pour him a glass of water. Shao Qingyuan was about to drink when Li Chuanxiang came to find trouble and pushed Grandpa Li down. Shao Qingyuan quickly helped Grandpa Li into the house to rest. When he came out again, Li Chuanxiang had already run away in fear. As for the glass of water on the table, after the commotion just now, it had all spilled out. More than half of it had spilled on the plate of cut peaches on the table. Shao Qingyuan had specially bought the peaches for his grandfather. Li Chuanxiang had even taken half of them just now. Shao Qingyuan gave the remaining half of the peaches to his grandfather. Anyway, the glass of water was clean, so there was no need to wash the peaches again. Neither of them expected that the peaches had already been poisoned. It was unknown where Grandpa Li found this poison. After taking this poison, one's reaction would be slow and their limbs would be stiff, as if they had a stroke. Shao Qingyuan froze. He didn't understand why his grandfather would give him such poison. Grandpa Li was already awake at this moment. After knowing that he had said something he shouldn't have said in his dream, he didn't panic. Instead, he quickly calmed down. There was no longer any love in his eyes when he looked at Shao Qingyuan, only coldness and disgust. Then Shao Qingyuan heard the truth from him. Why did I feed you poison? Of course, it's to make you wish you were dead. Grandpa Li smiled as he spoke. I didn't pick you up from the mountains at all. Your father and grandmother personally handed you to me. He looked at Shao Qingyuan's stunned expression, and his eyes were filled with joy. When you were born, your mother died, and she died especially tragically. When you were a month old, your biological brother fell ill. 2 months later, your father's business suffered a huge blow. Your grandmother found an expert to read your fortune and found out that you had a tough life. If you continue to stay at home, your family will be wiped out and you won't have any descendants. Shao Qingyuan's face turned pale, but he listened without moving. The expert said that if they wanted to change your family's fate, they could only send you away. Not only must they send you away, but they also had to suppress your fate. The more miserable you are, the better. Only then will your family become richer and richer. In the future, they will have many children and grandchildren, and the family will prosper. Therefore, your father personally handed you to me and instructed me to watch over you. I can't let you die, nor can I let you have a promising future. You can't have friends, leave your hometown, and must be trapped in this small Yongfu village. It's best to be depressed for the rest of your life. Ah, look, you're so pitiful. Your life is a joke. No one cares about you. Shao Qingyuan only felt depressed and his vision darkened. After a long time, he said with difficulty, Then you were so nice to me. In order to make sure that you can't leave the Li family and Yongfu village, do you know what's the most important thing to restrain a person? Of course, it's to hold his feelings and make him unable to let go. I'm very successful, right? Shao Qingyuan looked at the person in front of him. The person was so unfamiliar that he didn't seem to recognize him. Chapter 580. Looking for biological parents, Shao Qingyuan recalled many things that he had never thought about before. For example, when he arrived at the Li family, although Madame Bao had 2 daughters, She was pregnant with another child. No one knew if it was a boy or a girl. The Li family also had a second and third branch. Why did Grandpa insist on raising him under the door of the vicious eldest son's family? For example, every time he was beaten and scolded, Grandpa would stand in the courtyard and scold the couple. Not only did the second and third branches watch the commotion, but even the neighbors outside saw it as a joke. Therefore, after that, the first branch beat and insulted him even more badly. For example, if there was anything good, his grandfather would never let him eat it in private. He would always take it out openly in front of the other children in the family. Therefore, he became the enemy of all the Li family children. For example, even though his grandfather knew that his adoptive parents did not treat him well, he still used all kinds of excuses to make him stay. So, this was the case. At that moment, Qingyuan's heart sank, and the surrounding colors seemed to dim. He heard his drifting voice say, "If that's the case, why are you telling me now?" "Ha ha." Old Master Li laughed wildly. He looked at Qingyuan with pity and joy. "Because I'm going to die." He knew that he wouldn't be able to live. Before he died, that would be the time for him to truly destroy Qingyuan. It gave him the most fatal blow. What was physical harm? How pitiful would it be when he realized that the only person he trusted in his life, the one he could rely on and hold on to, had never treated him as a human. Therefore, the love was fake. All the care was a lie. It was just to drag him down to a deeper hell. His life had always been colorless. What he thought to be love feelings was an act that others put on for him to see. He had always been alone. Qingyuan didn't know how he left home. He went to return the carriage and used the money he planned to treat his grandfather with to go to a restaurant for a meal. He went deep into the mountains and killed 2 wild boars. He lay on the hot ground and looked at the sky. When he came back, his grandfather was dead. Qingyuan dragged him to the Li family and didn't care about him anymore. Everyone was scolding him, saying that he was an ingrate who couldn't be talked sense into. They said that the old man had given him all his feelings when he was alive, but he didn't even send him off. Qingyuan didn't explain anything. He locked the door and left the village. He only returned half a year later. The Li family had raided the house. He went to the Li family and smashed all the pots and pans they had taken from him. He tore down the Li family's courtyard door and beat Father Li up. From then on, the people of Yongfu village avoided him like snakes and scorpions. They hated him for being ruthless, and no one interacted with him anymore, except for the Zheng family who lived next door. This was how he had lived for the past 5 years. Until he met Yundong. After saying what had happened over the years, Qingyuan went from uneasiness to calmness. It was as if the harm was no longer important. But he still looked at Yundong nervously. At this moment, Yundong only felt a ball of fire burning crazily in his heart. It was so hot that she could only suppress it desperately to retain a trace of rationality. She wanted to kill everyone in the Li family. What right did they have to bully Qingyuan? She wanted to dig out that disgusting old man from the Li family's grave and whip his corpse. Such a beast should not have died so easily. She wanted to... Her hand was squeezed. Yundong's eyes were slightly red and her voice was a little hoarse. "I'm here." "Are you afraid?" he asked cautiously. Yundong did not react for a moment. On the other hand, Dajiang, who was sitting not far away, slapped the table and cursed. "What's there to be afraid of?" "Thinks. It's all nonsense. Death is just eternal sleep. Your biological father and grandmother actually let a smelly old man torture you for the rest of your life. They're cold-blooded and incompetent. What a bunch of crap." Qingyuan was stunned and looked at Dajiang in surprise. After venting his anger, Dajiang met his gaze and immediately felt a little embarrassed. He quickly changed the topic. "Then have you looked for your biological parents? Perhaps that old man lied to you?" Qingyuan's voice was much calmer this time. "I've looked for them. He didn't lie to me." Chapter 581. His biological parents looked for them? Yundong frowned. Looking at his cold expression, a thought suddenly flashed across her mind. A moment later, She suddenly froze and looked at Shao Qingyuan. Are you talking about? She paused and lowered her voice. The Tao family? Shao Qingyuan nodded. Yes, it's the Tao family, a big brewer in Fengkai County. Gu Yundong recalled the disgusted expression he had when they first met Master Tao in the restaurant and the cold expression he had when he met Tao Feng at the bodyguard agency. At that time, she found it strange. Shao Qingyuan should not have any interaction with the Tao family at all. The Tao family did not seem to know him. Why did his emotions change when he saw the Tao family? So that was how it was. It was because he was a member of the Tao family. Shao Qingyuan said, I went to ask an old man from the Tao family in the past. 20 years ago, the Tao family did have a child. When he was born, Mrs. Tao died in childbirth. The eldest young master of the Tao family, Tao Feng, later fell seriously ill. Then, there was a huge problem with the Tao family's business. Not long after, the third young master of the Tao family died. At that time, the Tao family already had 2 young masters. Tao Feng was the eldest young master and was born by Mrs. Tao. The one who made the bet with Liu Wei was the second young master, by the name of Tao Xing. He was the son of a concubine and was deeply loved by Master Tao. After Mrs. Tao passed away, this concubine was made a wife in a few years. The people of the Tao family all feel that it's a pity. Few people know what this premature death is about. I found the old man who served old Madame Tao and asked him. Back then, that child was handed over to a stableman of the Tao family. As for the Li family's old man, he had been a stableman in the Tao mansion for 2 years. Lady Tao, who had died in childbirth, was surnamed Shao. When the Tao family's business was in trouble, there was indeed an expert who came to investigate the feng shui of the Tao family. In the past 10 years, old Master Li had visited the Tao family twice. Gu Yundong fell silent when she heard that, but she thought fiercely in her heart. When the Liu family and the Tao family made a bet, she was simply too benevolent to the Tao family. She should have been heavy-handed at that time. What kind of people were they? They listened to a so-called expert and sent their own flesh and blood away to a stableman. Moreover, they wanted someone to torture him for the rest of his life. They were simply beasts. They were inhuman and unbearable as parents. She was so angry that her entire body was trembling. She recalled the first time she saw Shao Qingyuan. Perhaps they might as well settle the old and new scores together. When Gu Dajiang thought of this, he felt a little anxious. As expected, Yundong was right. Their family didn't lack money now, but they lacked connections and background. No, he had to quickly read. In 2 days he would go to the academy in the Prefectural city to meet Mountain Elder Qi. If he passed the test, he would be able to study in the academy and strive to take the imperial examination as soon as possible. Not to mention how high his ranking was, even if he was an elementary scholar, he would still have a good title. As Gu Dajiang thought about it, he simply stood up and went to the bookcase to get the books Yuanzhi had given him. Although he had been very busy for the past 2 days, he had taken the time to read a book. Yuanzhi had given him books that he had read before. There were many notes on them. To Gu Dajiang, these were very rare and precious things. Tong and Shui Rong found it strange that their master had suddenly become diligent. However, they did not ask further and quietly left the room. Chapter 583, Going to Cause Trouble Soon. 2 days passed in a flash. The Gu family discovered something strange. It was as if the relationship between young Miss and young Master Shao had suddenly improved by leaps and bounds. When they passed by, they could feel the sweet atmosphere between them. It seemed that although old Master had made things difficult for young Master Shao, he was indeed building up the relationship between the 2 young people. Indeed, he had put in a lot of effort. They had all misunderstood him. It was obvious from the fact that old Master didn't chase Shao Qingyuan away to the Shao family to recuperate. He was a stubborn but soft-hearted person. Even Aunt Ku thought so. Gu Dajiang was speechless. He felt bitter and didn't want to speak. Shao Qingyuan's recovery ability was strong. At this moment, He was mostly recovered. He could even practice boxing on the ground energetically. He felt that this illness was worth it. The knot in his heart that had been kept for many years was untied. Yundong seemed to love him more and more. Well, this wasn't an illusion. After he recovered, he dealt with the 2 baskets of herbs he had picked on the mountain. Unfortunately, he still did not find Bai Muzi on this trip up the mountain. Otherwise, that would be the best betrothal gift for the Gu family. Shao Qingyuan sighed in his heart. After packing up the herbs, he washed his hands and asked Mao to gather the other 3. Mao seemed to know what he was going to do and asked excitedly, "Young master, are you going to the Li family to settle scores with them?" Shao Qingyuan rolled up his sleeves. The clothes he was wearing now were still the old clothes from before. He didn't know if it was because his life had been better recently, or maybe because his food had improved, but he seemed to have grown taller and stronger, and his clothes didn't seem to fit him well. However, it was finding trouble with someone. What if there was blood? Yundong had bought all his good new clothes for him. He couldn't dirty them. Hearing Mao's question, he nodded. Mao immediately jumped up and went to pull Go and the other 2 back. When they heard that they were going to the Li family, they all began to rub their fists and turn their heads to look for suitable tools. When they walked out of the Shao family's house, Zhu couldn't help but ask, "Young master, Miss went to the neighboring village today and hasn't returned. Why don't we wait for Miss to come back first?" That's right. Let Miss see our mighty and majestic appearance." "What do you know?" Mao patted Zhu and Shu and said with an unfathomable expression, "This scene will be too cruel. What if it scares her?" Shao Qingyuan glanced at him, and everyone saw him nod in agreement. Shu and the other 2 felt like their jaws were about to drop. Wait, with Miss Personality, would she be afraid? She was not human when she was savage, all right? When they thought of the tragic fate of the old Gu family and Gu Gang's family in Gu village, they would even shiver. However, forget it. Who asked young master to care too much about his image? They would reluctantly cooperate. The weather was very hot, so it was not very late. Occasionally, villagers would carry hoes and baskets back from the fields. Seeing Shao Qingyuan walk towards the Li family expressionlessly, their hearts couldn't help but skip a beat. It felt like something big was about to happen. Soon, the villagers of Yongfu village seemed to have discovered something extraordinary. They quickly spread the news. Shao Qingyuan was about to cause trouble. When someone came to call them, they reluctantly stepped forward and advised without much sincerity, "Qingyuan, no matter what, eldest brother and sister-in-law are your adoptive parents. What are outsiders going to say about you? You'll be scolded for being unfilial." That's right. If the Gu family finds out about this, will Miss Gu still marry you? Let go first. If there's anything, sit down and talk. It was fine if they did not mention Gu Yundong, but when she was mentioned, Shao Qingyuan's eyes turned even colder. He turned his head and punched Li Debao in the stomach. Eldest Li and Madame Bao screamed. "Shao Qingyuan, stop. What do you want? We apologize, okay?" The 2nd and 3rd branches of the Li family immediately did not dare to speak. Instead, the discussion outside the door kept buzzing. Why do I feel that Shao Qingyuan's actions are a little familiar? That's right. Especially, the more you call your parents, the more miserably you will be beaten. Because I've done it before. A low laugh suddenly sounded behind everyone. Why don't you ask everyone if my father-in-law dug his heart out for him and treated him better than a biological grandson? In the end, my father-in-law was seriously ill and this guy didn't take care of him. Even after he died, he was thrown into our house and this guy went back to eat and drink? Eldest Li nodded as well. That's right. I went to look for Gu Dajiang for the sake of the Gu family. We can't bear to see a good lady like Miss Gu ruined like this. Everyone's discussion became even louder. Eldest Li and his wife were right about those things. Shao Qingyuan really left old Master Li alone. The buzzing sound entered Gu Yundong's ears, but it made her anger rise bit by bit. She tightened her grip and slowly walked into the courtyard. Seeing this, Chen Liang immediately said worriedly, "Yundong, calm down first. There might be a secret behind this. You know Qingyuan's character." Madame Bao was furious. Chen Liang actually protected Shao Qingyuan. She stood up abruptly. "Miss Gu, you have no idea how terrifying Shao Qingyuan is." Chapter 587. Terrifying Thinking. Gu Yundong nodded in agreement. "I really don't know how terrifying he is." Madame Bao instantly smiled and looked at Shao Qingyuan maliciously. But then, Gu Yundong's voice turned cold. She changed the topic and said sharply, "But I do know how scary your Li family is." The smile on Madame Bao's face froze. She turned to look at Gu Yundong in surprise. What do you mean?" "What do I mean?" Gu Yundong sneered. "Have you forgotten that when Shao Qingyuan was 5 years old, you threw the weak child into the mountains to feed the wolves just because of a nightmare? You treated human lives like grass and were inhumane." The villagers watching outside the courtyard instantly widened their eyes. The Li family's eldest branch had once thrown the 5-year-old Shao Qingyuan into the mountains to feed the wolves? Even Chen Liang looked at Gu Yundong in surprise. Then he suddenly faced Madame Bao. Eldest Li and his wife turned pale and were about to retort. Unexpectedly, Gu Yundong quickly said, "Or have you forgotten that when Shao Qingyuan was 8 years old, you colluded with the human traffickers in the county and sold him to them, almost making him unable to come back?" Madame Bao retorted almost subconsciously, "We didn't take a single cent. It's not considered selling." Gu Yundong laughed. "So, you admit to colluding with the human traffickers?" Only then did Madame Bao realize that she had said something she shouldn't have. There was no chance to deny it anymore. The villagers gasped in unison. They did not know that the Li family had actually done such a thing. Someone could not help but look at the people from the second and third branches and ask, "Is it true?" Eldest Li and his wife really. Of course, the second and third branches knew what had happened back then. They lived in the same house and were not deaf or blind. However, in the face of everyone's questions, they only lowered their heads and stammered, "We don't know. How could we know what they did?" With that, they rushed back. They did not care if the eldest branch was dead or alive. They were very selfish. However, the villagers had completely believed this. Previously, when they heard that eldest Li had thrown Shao Qingyuan into the mountains, they could still condemn him for his ruthlessness. However, it was none of their business. Other than scolding him ruthlessly, they could not do anything else. But that was not the case for the latter part. Colluding with the human traffickers? The person who was sold back then was Shao Qingyuan. Then, would their own child be sold someday if they had a grudge against elderly? At the thought of this, the villagers were filled with wariness and anger towards the Li family.